The gunshot echoed through Dry Creek's dusty streets as Clara Whitfield pressed the rifle barrel against Samuel Dyer's chest. "You called me too smart to be a bride," she said, her voice steady despite the blood trickling down her arm. "Maybe you were right." Behind her, the legendary gunslinger Jack Calder lay bleeding in the dirt, and she had seconds to decide. Pull the trigger and become the woman this frontier would never forget, or lower the weapon and lose everything she'd fought to build. My friends, this is a story of brilliance rejected, violence unleashed, and love forged in gunpowder. Follow me to the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The train's whistle pierced the August heat as it pulled into Dry Creek Station, black smoke billowing against the endless Colorado sky. Clara Whitfield stood in the doorway of the passenger car, her emerald dress pristine despite 3 days of travel, a leather-bound medical journal clutched in one gloved hand. She was 26 years old with auburn hair pinned beneath a modest hat and eyes that held the sharp intelligence of someone who had read every book she could find and remembered them all. The platform below teemed with the usual frontier chaos: cowboys herding cattle, merchants hawking wares, children darting between legs. But Clara's gaze fixed on the man standing apart from the crowd, holding a wooden sign with her name carved in crude letters. Samuel Dyer, her intended husband, looked nothing like the photograph he'd sent. Where the picture showed a clean-shaven gentleman in a pressed suit, this man wore dust-caked overalls and a week's worth of stubble. His eyes, small and calculating, swept over her with the same appraising look he might give a horse at auction. "Miss Whitfield?" His voice carried the rough edge of whiskey and tobacco. "Mr. Dyer." Clara descended the train steps with practiced grace, extending her hand for a proper greeting. Samuel ignored it, reaching instead for her trunk. "You bring a lot of baggage for a bride," he grunted, struggling with the weight. "What's in here, Rox?" "Books, primarily. Medical texts, literature, some philosophy." Samuel dropped the trunk with a thud that made her wince. "Books?" The word twisted in his mouth like something sour. What does a ranch wife need with books? Clara felt the first flutter of unease, but kept her voice level. "I understood from your letters that you valued education. You wrote that you wanted a companion who could contribute to the community's growth." "I wanted someone who could read and write enough to help with the ledgers," Samuel said, already turning away. "Not some Eastern princess who thinks she's better than honest folk." The ride to Samuel's ranch took 2 hours through terrain that shifted from dusty town streets to rolling grassland punctuated by clusters of pine and cottonwood. Clara tried to engage him in conversation, asking about the local climate, the soil conditions, the prevalence of various diseases in the cattle population. Each question met with increasingly hostile silence, until finally Samuel pulled the wagon to a stop. "Listen here, Miss Whitfield," he said, not bothering to look at her. "I paid good money to bring you out here. $300, which is more than most men make in half a year. I expect a wife who knows her place, not one who talks like she swallowed a dictionary." "Mr. Dyer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. You're here to cook, clean, bear children, and keep quiet while men handle important matters. That's what I paid for." Clara's hands clenched in her lap, crumpling the fabric of her dress. "You didn't pay for me, Mr. Dyer. You paid for my passage. I am not livestock to be purchased." Samuel's face darkened to the color of raw beef. "You got a smart mouth on you." "I have an educated mouth, Mr. Dyer." "There's a significant difference." The slap came without warning, snapping Clara's head to the side. The taste of copper flooded her mouth. She touched her lip, fingers coming away bloody, and something fundamental shifted inside her. She had left Boston to escape the suffocating constraints of Eastern society, believing the frontier would offer freedom. Instead, she'd found a different cage, cruder but no less confining. "That's your first lesson," Samuel said, clicking the reins to start the horses moving again. "Plenty more where that came from if you keep testing me." The ranch house squatted on the landscape like a toad, all rough timber and inadequate windows. Inside, dust coated every surface, and the smell of rotting food emanated from what passed for a kitchen. Samuel showed her to a small room barely large enough for a narrow bed and washstand. "You'll sleep here until the wedding," he said. 3 days from now. Pastor comes through every other Sunday. and we'll make it official then. Mr. Dyer, I think we should discuss. No discussion. You're here, you're mine, end of story. Now get this place cleaned up. I've got business in town. He paused at the door. And hide those damn books. I don't want to see them again. Clara waited until the sound of his wagon faded before allowing herself to cry. Not from sadness or self-pity, but from pure, incandescent rage. She had graduated third in her class from Boston Women's Medical Seminary, one of only 12 women in a program of 200. She had assisted in surgeries, delivered babies, treated tuberculosis patients. She had published papers on the importance of sanitation in preventing disease spread, and now she was expected to bury all of that to become a rancher's silent servant. That night, by candlelight, she wrote in her journal, "I find myself at a crossroads. I can submit to this man's tyranny, lose everything I am, and spend my days in servitude. Or I can fight. The frontier may be lawless in many ways, but perhaps that lawlessness can work in my favor. If there are no rules saying a woman must be property, then there are also no rules saying she cannot be free." The next morning, Clara rose before dawn. She prepared Samuel's breakfast, bacon, eggs, coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, and set it on the table. When he emerged from his room, scratching himself indecently, she stood by the window, fully dressed in her traveling clothes. "I've made a decision," she said without preamble. "This arrangement won't work." Samuel froze mid-scratch. "What did you say?" "I said this arrangement is concluded. I'll reimburse you for my passage as soon as I secure employment in town." "Employment?" Samuel laughed, a sound like grinding millstones. "What kind of employment do you think you'll find?" "You think anyone in Dry Creek will hire a woman who couldn't even last 3 days as a bride?" "I have medical training. The town has a doctor, does it not?" "Old Doc Hawkins?" "He's been drunk more often than sober for the past 5 years. Besides, no one's going to let a woman touch them for doctoring. It ain't proper." Clara picked up her medical bag, feeling the familiar weight of instruments and medicines. "Then I suppose I'll have to prove them wrong." Samuel moved to block the door. "You're not going anywhere. We have a contract. Show it to me." "What?" "The contract. You claim to have purchased me. Show me the bill of sale." Samuel's face purpled. "You know what I mean?" "I know exactly what you mean, Mr. Dyer. You mean that you sent money to a marriage broker who used it to arrange my passage. That creates no legal obligation on my part. I came here in good faith, seeking partnership." "You've made it clear you want ownership. Those are incompatible goals." "You think you're so smart," Samuel snarled. "You think those fancy words make you better than us. But you're nothing but a woman, and a woman alone in Dry Creek might as well be dead." Clara met his gaze steadily. "Then I suppose I'll die on my feet rather than live on my knees." She pushed past him, expecting him to grab her, to strike her again. Instead, he laughed, cold and mean. "Go on, then. Run to town with your tail between your legs. When you're starving in the street, don't come crawling back here. You had your chance at a good life, and you threw it away because you're too proud to know your place." Clara walked the 2 hours to town, her trunk left behind, carrying only her medical bag and a small valise with her most essential belongings. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly, and her dress was soaked with perspiration by the time she reached Dry Creek's main street. The town was larger than she'd initially realized, with perhaps 500 souls calling it home. The main street stretched for 3 blocks, lined with establishments both essential and unseemly. A general store, a blacksmith, 2 saloons, a hotel that had seen better days, and at the far end, a small building with a painted sign reading, "Dr. T. Hawkins, Physician." Clara knocked on the doctor's door. No answer. She knocked again, harder. "He ain't there," called a woman from across the street. She was perhaps 40, with graying hair and a kind face weathered by sun and hardship. "Doc's at the Brass Monkey. That's the saloon on 2nd Street. Been there since yesterday afternoon." "Thank you," Clara said. "I'm Clara Whitfield. I just arrived in town." The woman's expression shifted, recognition dawning. "You're Samuel Dyer's bride. Heard you was coming in on the train." "Former bride," Clara corrected. The arrangement didn't suit. The woman whistled low. "Samuel's not going to like that. He's been bragging all over town about the educated woman he was bringing in from back east. I'm sure he'll recover from the disappointment. Could you direct me to the Brass Monkey? Honey, that ain't no place for a lady. Nevertheless, the woman studied her for a long moment, then smiled. You know what? I like you. Name's Martha Brennan. I run the boarding house up the street. The Brass Monkey's that way, but you might want to wait. Clara was already walking. The Brass Monkey reeked of whiskey, sweat, and tobacco smoke thick enough to cut. Every head turned when Clara entered, conversations dying mid-sentence. She spotted the doctor immediately. He was the only man present wearing a vest that might once have suggested professional dignity, though it was now stained with what appeared to be blood, whiskey, and possibly vomit. Dr. Hawkins? He looked up from his card game with bleary eyes. If you're pregnant, come back tomorrow. If you're dying, make it quick. I've got 2 pairs. I'm neither. My name is Clara Whitfield. I'm a trained physician from Boston Women's Medical Seminary. I'd like to discuss the possibility of assisting in your practice. The silence that followed was complete. Then someone laughed, a single bark that triggered an avalanche of mirth. The entire saloon erupted, men slapping tables, stomping feet, howling with glee. Dr. Hawkins didn't laugh. He studied her with eyes that seemed suddenly less clouded. You have credentials. Clara reached into her bag and produced her diploma, her letters of recommendation, her published papers. Hawkins examined them while the laughter gradually died around them. These are real, he said, surprise evident in his voice. Yes. You've assisted in surgery? 12 times. I've also delivered 33 babies and treated everything from broken bones to tuberculosis. Hawkins was quiet for a long moment. Then he folded his cards and stood, swaying slightly. Come with me. They walked back to his office, the doctor moving with the careful precision of a man who had learned to function while intoxicated. Inside, Clara saw immediately why he might welcome assistance. The place was chaos, instruments unsterilized, medicines expired or improperly stored, patient records scattered like autumn leaves. I haven't been, well, for some time, Hawkins admitted. My wife died 2 years ago. Cholera. I couldn't save her. Haven't been able to save much of anything since. I'm sorry for your loss. He waved away her sympathy. Here's the situation, Miss Whitfield. This town needs a doctor. I'm barely managing to be half of one. You're offering to be the other half, maybe more. But these people won't accept a woman doctor easily. Then we'll have to change their minds. It won't just be minds you're fighting. Samuel Dyer's got influence here. He supplies beef to half the town, has financial stakes in both saloons and the hotel. When he hears you're working with me, then we'd better prove my worth before he has a chance to object. As if on cue, the door burst open. A man carried in a boy of perhaps 10, blood streaming from a gash in his leg. Doc! Billy got caught in the barbed wire. It's bad. Hawkins reached for a bottle, but Clara was already moving. Put him on the table. Doctor, I'll need hot water, clean cloth, and your suture kit. Who the hell are you? The man demanded. Someone who can save your son's leg if you'll let me. Or we can argue while he bleeds out. Your choice. The man looked at Hawkins, who nodded. Let her work, Tom. Trust me. For the next 30 minutes, Clara worked with the focused intensity that had impressed her professors. She cleaned the wound, examining it for debris, checking for damage to major vessels. The boy whimpered but didn't scream, watching her with wide eyes. You're very brave, she told him. What's your name? Billy Morrison, he managed through gritted teeth. Well, Billy Morrison, you're going to have an impressive scar. The girls will think you're quite the hero. Billy managed a weak smile. Clara began suturing, her stitches precise and even. She'd learned from the best surgeons in Boston, and it showed. There, she said finally, bandaging the leg. Keep it clean and dry. Come back in 3 days so I can check for infection. If you see red streaks moving up from the wound or if he develops a fever, bring him immediately. Tom Morrison stared at the neat line of stitches. That's better work than I've ever seen Doc do. No offense, Doc. None taken, Hawkins said, sounding more sober than he had all day. Miss Whitfield trained at one of the best medical colleges in the country. Miss Whitfield. Tom's eyes widened. You're Samuel's bride? Not anymore. Tom digested this information, then reached into his pocket. What do I owe you? Nothing for today. We'll discuss payment once we see how well Billy heals. After the Morrisons left, Hawkins sat heavily in his chair. That was impressive. It was basic wound management. Not the medicine, the way you handled Tom. You didn't ask permission, didn't apologize for being a woman, you just did the job. In my experience, competence speaks louder than credentials. Maybe in Boston. Out here things are different. He paused. But I could use the help. God knows I need it. Here's what I propose. You work with me, official-like. We split fees 60-40, 50-50. You're negotiating. You need me more than I need you, doctor. You can barely stand, let alone perform surgery. I can practice without you if necessary. You've simply made it easier by lending legitimacy. Hawkins laughed, a rusty sound. Fair enough. 50-50. But you handle the night calls. I'm too old and too drunk for that nonsense. They shook hands, and Clara felt something she hadn't experienced since leaving Boston. Hope. Word spread quickly, as it did in small towns. Within hours, everyone knew that Samuel Dyer's bride had left him and was working with Doc Hawkins. Opinions varied wildly. Some, like Martha Brennan, admired her courage. Others, particularly the men who gathered in Samuel's circle, saw it as an affront to the natural order. Clara took a room at Martha's boarding house, a clean space with good light for reading. That first night, she heard the whispers of other boarders through the thin walls. Ain't natural, a woman doing man's work. Samuel's fit to be tied. Says he's gonna run her out of town. Good luck with that. You see how she fixed the Morrison boy? Like magic. The next morning, Clara arrived at the clinic to find Samuel waiting, along with two other men she didn't recognize. They stood like a wall of muscle and menace. We need to talk, Samuel said. I'm busy, Mr. Dyer. If you require medical attention, please wait your turn. You made a fool of me. You managed that without my assistance. One of the other men, a thick-necked individual with scarred knuckles, stepped forward. Lady needs to learn some manners, Samuel. Back off, Jennings, said a new voice. Tom Morrison stood in the doorway, his son Billy beside him on crutches. The lady saved my boy's leg yesterday. Anyone has a problem with her has a problem with me. Tom, this ain't your business, Samuel warned. It is when you're threatening the only competent medical help this town's seen in years. Other townspeople had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. My boy would have lost his leg if not for her. Maybe died from blood loss. You want to run her out because she wouldn't marry you? That's petty, even for you. Samuel's face darkened. She has a contract, which I've already explained is invalid, Clara interrupted. Mr. Dyer, you're embarrassing yourself. Please leave or I'll have the sheriff remove you. Sheriff's my cousin, Samuel said with a cold smile. And Tom Morrison's mine, the sheriff said, appearing as if summoned. He was a tall, lean man with thoughtful eyes. Morning, Miss Whitfield. Heard you did fine work on young Billy. Thank you, Sheriff. Morrison, Pete Morrison, Tom's older brother. He turned to Samuel. I think you boys should move along. The lady's got work to do. Samuel looked ready to argue, but Jennings touched his arm. Come on. This ain't over. After they left, Sheriff Morrison lingered. You've made an enemy there, Miss Whitfield. Samuel Dyer don't forgive slights. I didn't come here to make enemies, Sheriff. Just to practice medicine. Sometimes that's the same thing in a town like this. Watch yourself. The warning proved prescient. Over the next week, Clara faced a campaign of harassment. Her room at the boarding house was ransacked while she was at the clinic, though nothing was stolen. Dead animals appeared on the clinic doorstep. Men would follow her on the street, never quite threatening, but always present. Through it all, Clara continued working. She treated everything from broken bones to birthing complications, each success building her reputation. The women, initially skeptical, began specifically requesting her for female complaints they'd never felt comfortable discussing with Doc Hawkins. You're winning them over, Hawkins observed one evening as they closed the clinic. He'd been drinking less since she arrived, she noticed. Having a purpose seemed to help. Some of them, Clara agreed. But Samuel's faction... A rock crashed through the window, showering them with glass. Clara threw herself sideways, pulling Hawkins down with her. More rocks followed, then silence. "You hurt?" Hawkins asked. "No." "You?" "Just my pride. And my window." They stood carefully, broken glass crunching underfoot. Outside, the street was empty, but Clara could see shadows moving in the alley across the way. "This is escalating," Hawkins said. "Maybe you should..." "What? Run? Give Samuel exactly what he wants?" Clara's voice was steel. "I've run from one kind of prison already, Doctor." "I won't run from another." "Prisons don't usually throw rocks." "No, in Boston they threw words. Accusations of hysteria, of being too emotional for medicine, of trying to rise above my station." "At least here, the violence is honest." That night, Clara wrote in her journal, "The frontier is testing me in ways Boston never did." There, the battles were fought in committees and drawing rooms, with weapons of gossip and social exclusion. Here, the conflict is rawer, more dangerous, but also more straightforward. Samuel Dyer wants me gone because I wounded his pride. His allies support him from loyalty or fear or their own prejudices. But others support me because I've proven useful. It's a transaction I understand. Competence for acceptance. I can work with that. The next morning brought a new crisis. Mary Patterson, the blacksmith's wife, arrived at the clinic in labor. But this was no ordinary birth. Clara recognized immediately that the baby was breech. "How long have you been in labor?" Clara asked, examining her. "Since yesterday noon," Mary gasped between contractions. Hawkins paled. "That's too long. If the baby's breech..." "I can turn it," Clara said. I've done it before, but I need complete cooperation." "Do whatever you need," Mary's husband, a giant of a man named Josiah, said. "Just save them both." For the next 2 hours, Clara worked with intense focus. The procedure was delicate, dangerous. One wrong move could rupture the uterus or compress the umbilical cord. But Clara's hands were steady, her knowledge comprehensive. Slowly, carefully, she manipulated the baby into the correct position. "Now push," she commanded. 20 minutes later, a healthy baby girl took her first breath, her cries filling the clinic. Mary Patterson wept with relief and exhaustion. Josiah, the massive blacksmith, cried openly as he held his daughter. "She wouldn't have made it," he said to Clara. "Neither of them would have. Doc Hawkins, no disrespect, but you couldn't have done this." "No," Hawkins agreed quietly. "I couldn't have." Word of the successful delivery spread rapidly. That evening, Martha Brennan organized an impromptu celebration at the boarding house. Women who had previously kept their distance approached Clara with questions they'd been too embarrassed to ask Doc Hawkins. Men who had muttered about her presence now nodded respectfully when she passed. But Samuel Dyer was not among them. He stood across the street from the boarding house, watching the celebration through the windows, his expression dark as a thundercloud. "He's not going to let this go," Pete Morrison said, appearing beside Clara on the porch. "You've made him look weak. In his mind, that's worse than any crime." "What would you have me do, Sheriff?" "Be careful. Maybe arm yourself. Can you shoot?" "I can learn." Pete smiled slightly. "Somehow that doesn't surprise me. Tom can teach you. He's the best shot in the county when he's sober." "And when he's drunk?" "Second best." Clara purchased a Derringer the next day, a small gun that fit in her medical bag. Tom Morrison spent an afternoon teaching her to shoot behind the clinic, setting up bottles and cans as targets. "You're a natural," he said as she hit her 5th bottle in a row. "Steady hands from all that doctoring, I suppose." "Surgery and marksmanship require similar skills," Clara agreed. "Focus, breathing control, steady pressure. Just remember, shooting bottles ain't like shooting men." "I'm hoping it won't come to that." Tom's expression was grim. "Hope's good. But being prepared is better." That night, Clara was returning from a house call, old Mrs. Whelan's arthritis acting up again, when she heard footsteps behind her. She kept walking, hand moving to her medical bag where the Derringer rested. "Evening, Miss Whitfield." She turned to find Jennings and 2 other men blocking her path. The street was empty, most folks inside for supper. "Mr. Jennings, gentlemen." If you'll excuse me, we need to have a conversation about your future in Dry Creek. I wasn't aware my future was your concern. Jennings smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. Everything in this town concerns us. See, you've disrupted the natural order, women getting ideas above their station. That's dangerous thinking. Dangerous to whom? To everyone. Today you're doctoring. Tomorrow, women might want to vote, own property, run businesses. Where does it end? Ideally, with equality. Jennings laughed. Equality. You really are educated stupid, aren't you? I prefer to think of myself as intelligently optimistic. Samuel offered you a good life, protection, security, a home. You spat in his face. I declined his offer. There's a difference. Not to him. The men stepped closer, and Clara's hand closed around the derringer. But before she could draw it, a new voice cut through the tension. Evening, gentlemen. Miss Whitfield. A man emerged from the shadows, and Clara's breath caught. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with dark hair that needed cutting, and a face that would have been handsome if not for the scar running from his left temple to his jaw. He wore black from head to toe, and the way he moved, fluid, dangerous, made the 3 men step back instinctively. This ain't your concern, stranger, Jennings said, but his voice had lost its confident edge. Maybe not, the stranger agreed. His hand rested casually on the Colt at his hip. But I've been riding all day, and I was hoping the lady could direct me to the doctor. Got a shoulder that needs looking at. The clinic is closed, Jennings said. I wasn't asking you. The stranger's eyes never left Clara's face. They were gray, she noticed, like winter sky before a storm. I'm a doctor, Clara said. The clinic is this way. She walked past Jennings, who made no move to stop her. The stranger fell into step beside her, and she could feel the 3 men watching them leave. Thank you, she said once they were out of earshot. Don't thank me yet. I really do need medical attention. In the clinic, by lamplight, Clara saw the blood soaking through his shirt. What happened? Difference of opinion with some gentlemen about property rights. Whose property? Mine. They disagreed. Clara helped him remove his shirt, revealing a bullet wound in his shoulder. It was a few days old, showing signs of infection. This needs to be cleaned and drained, she said. It's going to hurt. I've had worse. As she worked, Clara studied him peripherally. His body bore numerous scars, knife wounds, bullet holes, what looked like old burns. This was a man intimately acquainted with violence. You're not from around here, she observed. No. Just passing through? That was the plan. Was? He was quiet for a moment. Seems like you might need help with those 3 fellows. I can handle them. The way you were handling them when I arrived, Clara's hands paused. I had a gun. A derringer from the weight distribution of your bag. 2 shots, maximum, 3 men, bad odds. How did you... I noticed things. It's kept me alive. Clara resumed working. Are you a lawman? No. Outlaw? Occasionally. Soldier? Once. What should I call you? Jack Calder. The name tickled something in Clara's memory. Where had she heard it before? Well, Mr. Calder, you're going to need to rest that shoulder for at least a week. I can recommend the boarding house. I'll camp outside town. That wound needs daily cleaning or the infection will spread. Then I'll come by daily. Clara finished bandaging his shoulder. You know, Mr. Calder, a suspicious person might think you're looking for an excuse to stay in Dry Creek. A suspicious person might be right. He pulled his shirt back on carefully. Those men won't stop, you know. Jennings is Samuel Dyer's dog, and Dyer won't rest until you're gone or broken. I don't break easily. Jack Calder looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara felt seen in a way that made her breath catch. No, he said quietly. I don't imagine you do. After he left, Clara stood in the empty clinic, her hands still tingling from the contact with his skin. She'd treated hundreds of patients, but something about Jack Calder unsettled her in ways that had nothing to do with medicine. She was still thinking about him when Hawkins arrived the next morning, looking more alert than she'd seen him in days. Heard you had some trouble last night, he said. Word travels fast. Faster when it involves Jack Calder. Clara looked up sharply. You know him? I know of him. Everyone does, or did, 5 years back. He was a captain in the Union Army, decorated for valor. Then something happened, no one knows what, and he left the military. Since then, he's been a ghost, showing up where there's trouble, usually leaving bodies behind. He's a killer. He's a survivor. There's a difference. The question is, what's he doing in Dry Creek? Before Clara could answer, the door opened and Sarah Miller rushed in, carrying her young son. Please, he can't breathe. Clara immediately shifted into doctor mode, examining the boy. His throat was swollen nearly shut, his lips turning blue. Allergic reaction, she diagnosed. Sarah, what did he eat? Nothing unusual. Wait, he was playing near the Pattersons' new beehive. He said something stung him. Bee sting allergy. Clara was already moving, preparing an emergency tracheotomy. Dr. Hawkins, hold him steady. Clara, have you done this before? Once? Successfully. She made the incision with steady hands, inserting a tube that would allow the boy to breathe while bypassing his swollen throat. Within moments, his color improved, his breathing steadied. He'll need to stay here for observation, Clara said. Sarah, from now on, he needs to avoid bees completely. Next time could be worse. Sarah Miller clutched Clara's hands, tears streaming. You saved him. God bless you. You saved my boy. That afternoon, while young Timothy Miller slept peacefully in the clinic, Clara found herself with a rare moment of quiet. She was updating patient records when Jack Calder returned for his wound cleaning. Heard you saved another life today, he said as she unwrapped his bandage. It's my job. Most people would call it a calling. What would you call it? Jack was quiet for a moment. Penance, maybe. We all have our ways of balancing the scales. And what scales are you balancing, Mr. Calder? The kind that keep me moving. Clara cleaned his wound in silence, noting that it was already looking better. Whatever else Jack Calder might be, he was a fast healer. Can I ask you something? She said finally. You can ask. Why did you really intervene last night? Jack looked at her directly. You reminded me of someone. Who? Someone who stood up when it would have been easier to stay down. Someone who died because of it. The pain in his voice was unmistakable. Clara wanted to press, but something in his expression warned her off. I'm sorry, she said instead. It was a long time ago. Time doesn't always heal. Sometimes it just teaches us to carry the weight better. Jack studied her. You sound like you know something about that. We all have our ghosts, Mr. Calder. That evening, Clara was closing the clinic when Martha Brennan arrived, looking troubled. There's something you should know, Martha said. Samuel's been meeting with some men from out of town. Rough types. The kind you hire when you want dirty work done. How many? 4, maybe 5. They're staying at the hotel, keeping to themselves mostly, but, Clara, these aren't cowboys or ranch hands. These are killers. Clara felt cold despite the warm evening. When? Soon, I think. Samuel's patience is running out, and you saving the Miller boy today just made things worse. You're showing him up, making him look petty and cruel in comparison. Which he is. Which makes him dangerous. Clara, you should leave. Tonight. Take the morning train and don't look back. I can't do that, Martha. Pride isn't worth dying for. It's not pride. If I run now, what happens to the next woman who tries to stand up? What message does that send to every girl in this town who dreams of being more than property? Martha sighed. I knew you'd say something like that. All right then. If you won't run, at least be ready. And that Calder fellow, he might be useful. He's a patient, nothing more. Martha gave her a knowing look. Honey, I've seen how he looks at you, and how you look at him when you think no one's watching. That man would kill for you. I don't want anyone killing for me. Want and need are different things out here. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, watching the street below, and saw shadows moving in ways that suggested surveillance. How many were Samuel's men? How many were simply townsfolk going about their business? A soft knock at her door made her reach for the derringer. Who is it? Calder. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, fully dressed and armed. We need to talk. It's late. They're coming tonight. Clara's blood chilled. How do you know? I've been watching them. 5 men, all armed, all experienced. They plan to take you from here, make it look like you left town voluntarily. Take me where? Jack's expression was grim. Nowhere you'd come back from. Clara sat heavily on her bed. What do I do? You have options. You could leave now, out the back. I have a horse. No. Clara, that's the first time you've used my name. It won't matter what I call you if you're dead. If I run now, Samuel wins. Every woman in this town loses. Every girl who might dream of something more, better they lose hope than you lose your life. Clara stood, moving to face him. Would you run? Jack was quiet for a long moment. No. Then don't ask me to. Then we fight. We? You think I'm going to let them take you? You barely know me. I know enough. What do you know? Jack stepped closer, and Clara could smell gunpowder and leather, could see the pulse beating in his throat. I know you're brilliant and brave and too stubborn for your own good. I know you could have had an easy life in Boston, but chose the hard path because it mattered more. I know you treat everyone, rich, poor, worthy, worthless, with the same dedication. And I know that if they hurt you, I'll kill every last one of them. Clara's breath caught. Jack! A crash from downstairs cut her off. Voices, rough and drunk-sounding, filled the boarding house. They're here, Jack said, drawing his Colt. Stay behind me. I can shoot. I know you can, but these men shoot back. They moved into the hallway as footsteps thundered up the stairs. Other boarders peered out their doors, then quickly retreated. At the top of the stairs, 5 men appeared, led by Jennings. Miss Whitfield, Jennings said with mock courtesy, you're coming with us. No, Clara said, stepping out from behind Jack. I'm not. Wasn't a request. And this isn't a negotiation. Jack's voice was calm, almost conversational. You boys turn around and leave. Now. One of the men, a thin fellow with dead eyes, laughed. You're outnumbered, friend. I've been outnumbered before. Jack Calder, another man said suddenly, recognition dawning. You're Jack Calder. You killed those 3 men in Amarillo. 4, Jack corrected. The 4th one died later. The atmosphere shifted, tension ratcheting higher. These men were killers, but Jack Calder was something else, a legend written in blood. This ain't your fight, Calder, Jennings said, but his voice had lost its confidence. I'm making it mine. Samuel Dyer's paying us good money, not enough. How would you know? Because if it was enough, you'd have better men. As it is, you've got one real gunfighter. He nodded at the thin man with dead eyes. 2 cowboys playing tough, 1 drunk, and you, Jennings. I could kill all 5 of you before you cleared leather. That's big talk. Jack's gun appeared in his hand so fast it seemed like magic. None of the men had even touched their weapons. That's fact, Jack said. Now leave. For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then the thin man slowly raised his hands. Not worth it, he told Jennings. Not for what Dyer's paying. One by one, the others backed down. They retreated down the stairs, and Clara heard the front door slam behind them. Jack holstered his weapon. They'll be back. Not tonight? No. But soon. With more men, better men. Samuel won't let this stand. Clara sagged against the wall, adrenaline leaving her shaky. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. He was right. The next morning, Clara arrived at the clinic to find a notice nailed to the door. By order of the town council, this establishment is closed, pending investigation of improper medical practices and moral turpitude. Any attempt to practice medicine within town limits will be met with arrest. It was signed by 3 council members, all friends of Samuel Dyer. Clara stood staring at the notice, her hands trembling with rage rather than fear. Behind her, Doc Hawkins arrived, took one look at the sign, and spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Bastards, he muttered. Moral turpitude? You've shown more moral fiber than the entire council combined. They can't do this, Clara said. People need medical care. They can, and they have. Samuel owns 2 of those council members outright, and the third owes him money. Jack Calder emerged from the shadows where he'd been keeping watch. Tear it down. That'll just give them excuse to arrest me, Clara said. Let them try. Before anyone could stop him, Jack ripped the notice from the door and tore it into pieces. The fragments scattered in the morning wind like snow. You just broke the law, Hawkins observed mildly. Won't be the first time. Jack turned to Clara. Open the clinic. Treat whoever comes. Make them drag you out if that's what it takes. Clara looked between the 2 men, then squared her shoulders and unlocked the door. You heard him, Doctor. We have work to do. Word of the closure notice spread quickly, but so did word that Clara was defying it. Tom Morrison was the first to arrive, bringing his wife, who'd developed a persistent cough. Council can go to hell, he declared loudly enough for passers-by to hear. My family gets medical care from whoever I damn well choose. Others followed, some boldly, others slipping in the back door. By noon, the clinic was busier than ever, a form of quiet rebellion against Samuel's authority. Clara treated each patient with her usual thoroughness, but part of her attention remained fixed on the street outside, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. It came just after 2 o'clock. Sheriff Pete Morrison entered, looking deeply uncomfortable, followed by Samuel Dyer and 2 deputies Clara didn't recognize. Not local men, she realized, hired guns with badges. Miss Whitfield, Pete began, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to stop practicing medicine until this matter is resolved. What matter, Sheriff? The matter of me saving lives? The matter of me being more competent than half the doctors west of the Mississippi? The matter of you practicing without a license, Samuel interjected, his voice oily with false concern. We've discovered your credentials may be fraudulent. Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. Fraudulent? I have my diploma, my letters of recommendation. From a women's medical college, Samuel sneered. Not a real institution. Everyone knows women can't be proper doctors. They lack the mental capacity, the emotional stability. I have more mental capacity in my little finger than you have in your entire thick skull, Clara shot back. And as for emotional stability, which one of us is orchestrating an elaborate persecution because their pride got wounded? Samuel's face purpled. Sheriff, arrest her. Pete shifted uncomfortably. Now, Samuel, that seems excessive. Arrest her, or I'll have the territorial marshal here by week's end to investigate why you're allowing unlawful medical practice in your jurisdiction. Pete, Tom Morrison said from where he stood near the door, you arrest that woman and you'll have a riot on your hands. Half this town owes her their lives or their children's lives. That's seditious talk, Morrison, one of the deputized gunmen said, hand moving to his weapon. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Claire could feel violence hovering like a storm about to break. Then Jack Calder spoke from where he'd been standing silently in the corner. Sheriff Morrison, you seem like a reasonable man. How about a compromise? All eyes turned to him. Pete looked relieved at any possibility of avoiding bloodshed. What kind of compromise? The lady continues her work, but under the supervision of a licensed physician. Doc Hawkins is still licensed, isn't he? Well, yes, but then there's no problem. She works under his authority until this matter of credentials can be properly investigated. Send a telegraph to Boston, verify her education. Should take, what, a week? Maybe 2? It was brilliant, Clara realized. Jack had given everyone a way to save face. Samuel couldn't object without seeming unreasonable, and Pete could avoid arresting her while still appearing to enforce the law. That could work, Pete said slowly. It's still irregular, Samuel protested, but he was already calculating. Clara could see it in his eyes. 2 weeks to bring in more men, to arrange something more permanent. He thought time was on his side. Seems fair to me, Hawkins spoke up. I'll take full responsibility for Miss Whitfield's actions. Pete nodded, clearly relieved. Then that's settled. Miss Whitfield, you can continue working under Dr. Hawkins' supervision pending verification of your credentials. Samuel, that satisfies the council's concerns about unlicensed practice. Samuel wanted to argue. Clara could see it, but too many townspeople were watching, and his position depended on maintaining at least a veneer of respectability. 2 weeks, he said finally. If her credentials aren't verified by then, she leaves town or goes to jail. After they left, Clara slumped against the examination table. 2 weeks. He'll never let that verification come through. No, Jack agreed. He won't. He'll try something else before then. So what do? We get ready for war. The next days took on a strange rhythm. During daylight, Clara worked at the clinic, treating patients under Hawkins' nominal supervision. The old doctor had actually reduced his drinking further, inspired by her dedication or perhaps shamed by his own deterioration. They worked well together, combining her modern techniques with his decades of frontier experience. But at night, Jack Calder taught her different lessons. Behind the boarding house, where no one could see, he instructed her in survival. How to really shoot, not just targets, but moving threats. How to use a knife when the gun was gone. How to read a room for danger, to position herself for escape, to strike first when violence was inevitable. "You're preparing me to kill," she said one night after successfully disarming him in a practice scenario. "I'm preparing you to live," he corrected. "Killing's just sometimes part of that." "You say that so easily." "Because I've had years to make peace with it. First time I killed a man, I threw up for an hour after. Second time, only a few minutes. By the 10th, it was just survival." "When was the first time?" Jack was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I was 15. Man tried to rob my family's farm. Would have killed my mother after he was done with her. I shot him with my father's hunting rifle. That must have been horrible. Less horrible than what would have happened if I hadn't." He met her eyes in the moonlight. "That's what you need to understand, Clara. Sometimes the horrible choice is the only choice." Their practice was interrupted by young Billy Morrison running up, out of breath. "Miss Clara, come quick. There's been an accident at the mine. The silver mine 5 miles outside town employed nearly 50 men." Clara grabbed her medical bag while Jack saddled horses. They rode hard through the darkness, arriving to find chaos. A shaft had partially collapsed, trapping 6 men. 3 had been pulled out, all badly injured. Clara worked through the night, setting bones, stitching wounds, treating crush injuries that tested every skill she possessed. Jack worked beside her, following her instructions without question, his strong hands gentle as he held men still for treatment or administered chloroform under her direction. "Where did you learn field medicine?" she asked him during a brief respite. "War teaches you many things. Mostly what I learned was how to watch people die. This, helping them live, it's better." By dawn, all 6 men had been extracted. 2 were dead, but 4 survived, largely thanks to Clara's efforts. The mine foreman, a gruff Welshman named Davies, pumped her hand with tears in his eyes. "You saved my boys," he said. "Don't care what the council says. You're the finest doctor this territory has ever seen." The ride back to town was slow, both of them exhausted. As they crested the hill overlooking Dry Creek, Jack suddenly pulled up short. "Riders coming," he said, hand moving to his gun. 4 men approached from the east, and Clara recognized none of them. They wore long coats despite the warming morning, and their horses were quality animals, built for speed and endurance. "Morning," the lead rider said, touching his hat brim. He was handsome in a cold way, with pale eyes that reminded Clara of a snake. "We're looking for the Dry Creek Hotel." "In town, Main Street," Jack answered, his voice carefully neutral. "Much obliged." The man's gaze lingered on Clara. "That's a lot of blood on your dress, miss." "Everything all right?" "Medical emergency," Clara replied shortly. "Ah, you must be the lady doctor we've heard about." "Samuel Dyer speaks highly of you." It was a lie so obvious it hung in the air like smoke. These were Samuel's reinforcements, the better men Jack had predicted. "I'm sure he does," Clara said dryly. The pale-eyed man smiled. "I'm Cole Harrigan. These are my associates. I expect we'll be seeing more of each other." They rode on, and Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Cole Harrigan," Jack said quietly. "He's a killer out of Texas. Expensive one. Samuel must be desperate to pay his rates." "You know him?" "By reputation. He's smart, careful, and completely without conscience. He'll wait for the perfect moment, then strike without warning." They returned to find the clinic surrounded by townspeople, all talking excitedly about the mine rescue. The story had already grown in the telling, and Clara found herself embarrassingly praised as a miracle worker. Just did my job, she insisted, but Martha Brennan wasn't having it. You rode out in the middle of the night, saved 4 men who would have died without you, and you call it just your job? Honey, that's heroism. Doc Hawkins met them at the clinic door. You've got patients waiting, he said, but he was smiling. Seems word of your mine rescue has brought in folks from all over the county. We've got a full day ahead. Clara threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction from thoughts of Cole Harrigan and what his presence meant. She treated everything from infected wounds to childhood ailments, each success adding another ally to her cause. Late in the afternoon, an elegant woman entered the clinic. She was perhaps 40, beautifully dressed in silk that seemed absurdly out of place in Dry Creek. Clara recognized her as Mrs. Victoria Ashford, wife of the territorial judge. Mrs. Ashford, Hawkins said, surprised. What brings you to Dry Creek? A delicate matter, Doctor. I was hoping to speak with Miss Whitfield, privately. Clara led her to the back room, curious. Victoria Ashford had a reputation as a formidable woman who had helped her husband rise from small-town lawyer to territorial judge through sheer force of will and social manipulation. I have a medical concern, Victoria began once they were alone. Something I cannot discuss with male physicians. I understand. How can I help? Victoria hesitated, then lifted her sleeve to reveal extensive bruising. My husband has strong opinions about wifely obedience. Clara's hands clenched, but she kept her voice professional. How long has this been happening? Years, but lately it's gotten worse. He's drinking more, angry about political setbacks. I fear he might kill me one of these times. You could leave him. Victoria laughed bitterly. Leave a territorial judge? With what money? To go where? No, Miss Whitfield. Women like us don't have the luxury of just leaving. Women like us? Intelligent women. Ambitious women. Women who refuse to be property. Victoria met her eyes. I know what Samuel Dyer's trying to do to you. My husband mentioned it, laughing about how you'd be put in your place soon enough. And you're telling me this why? Because I want you to win. Someone needs to prove that we're more than cattle to be owned and beaten. Victoria pulled down her sleeve. I can't fight my battle, but perhaps I can help you fight yours. How? My husband keeps all territorial legal records in his study, including the documentation about medical licensing requirements. Did you know that according to territorial law, any person with documented medical training from an accredited institution can practice medicine? The law says person, Miss Whitfield, not man. Clara's breath caught. The Boston Women's Medical Seminary is accredited, fully accredited by the Massachusetts Medical Board. I've seen the documentation myself. Victoria stood. There's a territorial council meeting in 3 days. My husband will be there. If someone were to present the legal precedent publicly with witnesses. Samuel couldn't refute it without challenging territorial law. Exactly. Victoria moved to leave, then paused. Be careful, Miss Whitfield. My husband tells me things when he's drunk. Samuel Dyer has paid Cole Harrigan $5,000. That's not harassment money. That's killing money. After Victoria left, Clara sat in the back room, mind racing. She had a legal avenue to secure her position, but would she live long enough to use it? That evening, she shared Victoria's information with Jack and Hawkins. The old doctor whistled low. 5,000? Christ, that's more than most folks see in a lifetime. It means Samuel's committed, Jack said. He's bet everything on removing Clara. When the legal challenge fails, he'll resort to violence. So we need to be ready, Clara said. We need to do more than that. We need allies. Jack stood. I'm going to have some conversations. He returned near midnight, slipping into the boarding house through Clara's window with a stealth that spoke of long practice. Tom Morrison's with us, he reported. So's his brother Pete, though he can't act officially. Davies from the mine is bringing 10 of his best men to town for the council meeting. They'll be armed. This is becoming a war, Clara said quietly. It was always a war. Now we're just admitting it. I don't want people dying for me. Jack moved closer, his hand gently touching her face. People won't be dying for you. They'll be dying for the idea that their daughters could be doctors, that their wives are partners, not property, that merit matters more than gender. You're just the catalyst. That's a heavy burden. You're strong enough to carry it. Clara leaned into his touch, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. What if I'm not? Then I'll carry it with you. They stood there in the darkness, and Clara felt something shift between them. Jack leaned down, and she rose to meet him, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and desperate all at once. It lasted only moments before Jack pulled back. I shouldn't have done that, he said. Why? Because I'll likely be dead within the week, and you don't need that grief. You don't get to decide what I need, Jack called her. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his scarred face. No, I suppose I don't. The next 2 days were tense with waiting. Cole Harrigan and his men had taken rooms at the hotel, making their presence known without taking any action. They lounged on the hotel porch, watching everyone who passed, especially Clara. It was psychological warfare, and it was working. Several patients canceled appointments, afraid to be associated with her. But others stood firm. Sarah Miller brought her recovering son for a checkup, staring down Harrigan as she passed. Tom Morrison made a point of walking Clara to and from the clinic, his hand conspicuously near his gun. Even Martha Brennan showed her support, bringing lunch to the clinic each day and staying to eat with Clara and Hawkins. You've started something, Martha said on the second day. Win or lose, this town won't be the same. Is that good or bad? Change is always painful. Whether it's good depends on what comes after. The night before the council meeting, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat at her window watching the street when she saw movement in the shadows. Multiple figures converging on the boarding house. She grabbed her derringer and medical bag, moving quickly to Jack's room. He was already awake, dressed, weapons ready. They're coming, she whispered. I know, backstairs, now. They slipped through the boarding house like ghosts, but as they reached the back door, it exploded inward. Cole Harrigan stood there, gun drawn, smile cold. Going somewhere? Jack pushed Clara behind him. This is between you and me, Harrigan. Actually, it's between me and my $5,000. Though I admit, killing the famous Jack Calder would be a nice bonus for my reputation. Then let's settle it. You and me. Leave the woman out of it. Harrigan laughed. Honor? Really? That's your play? His gun swung toward Clara. Here's what's going to happen. The lady comes with us. You can die trying to stop us, or you can walk away. Either way, she disappears tonight. Clara stepped out from behind Jack. I have a counteroffer. You're not in a position to negotiate. I have $10,000 in a Boston bank account, Clara lied smoothly. Double what Samuel's paying you. Let us go, and it's yours. Harrigan's eyes narrowed. Interesting. But how do I know? Jack's gun appeared in his hand, firing twice before Harrigan could finish the sentence. The killer dropped, 2 holes in his chest, surprise frozen on his face. He talks too much, Jack said. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Jack shoved Clara back inside as bullets shattered windows. They overturned tables for cover, Jack returning fire with deadly accuracy. How many? Clara shouted over the noise. 3, maybe 4. A figure appeared in the doorway, and Clara fired her derringer without thinking. The man screamed and fell back. Her hand shook as she realized she'd just shot someone, possibly killed them. Good shot, Jack said, then grunted as a bullet caught him in the side. Jack! I'm fine. Keep shooting. But he wasn't fine. Blood soaked his shirt, and his return fire was becoming less accurate. Clara reloaded her derringer with trembling fingers, trying to remember everything he'd taught her. Then, suddenly, the gunfire intensified, but from a different direction. Tom Morrison's voice rang out. Clara! Jack, we're here! The cavalry had arrived. Tom and Pete Morrison, Davies and his miners, even Doc Hawkins with an ancient shotgun. The remaining attackers, caught between 2 forces, tried to flee. One made it to a horse and escaped. The others weren't so lucky. As the gun smoke cleared, Clara dropped to her knees beside Jack, her medical training overriding her shock. The bullet had passed through his side, missing vital organs but causing significant blood loss. Need to get him to the clinic, she said. No, Jack gritted out. Too exposed. They'll expect that. Then where? My place, Tom Morrison said. It's defensible, and my wife can help. They carried Jack through the pre-dawn darkness, Clara keeping pressure on his wound. Her dress was soaked with blood, hers from a graze she hadn't even noticed, and that of the man she'd shot. At the Morrison house, Clara worked with desperate efficiency. She cleaned and stitched Jack's wound while he remained stubbornly conscious, refusing chloroform. Need to stay alert, he insisted. This isn't over. He was right. As dawn broke, Sheriff Pete Morrison arrived with news. Samuels called an emergency council meeting. Says you murdered Cole Harrigan and his men. He's demanding your immediate arrest and execution. That's absurd, Tom protested. They attacked first. We all saw it. Doesn't matter what we saw. Samuel's got 2 council members in his pocket, and Judge Ashford is arriving this morning to oversee the proceedings. Clara felt the walls closing in. Then she remembered Victoria's information about the medical licensing laws. Let them have their meeting, she said. I'll be there. Clara, that's suicide, Jack said from the bed. Samuel will have men, and I'll have the law. The actual territorial law, not Samuel's version of it. She spent the next hours preparing, gathering her credentials, researching the specific statutes Victoria had mentioned. Jack insisted on coming despite his injury, and by the time they reached the town hall, quite a procession had formed. Tom Morrison and his men, Davies and his miners, Martha Brennan and a surprising number of townswomen, all converging on the building where Clara's fate would be decided. The hall was packed, standing room only. Samuel sat at the council table, flanked by his 2 pet councilmen. Judge Ashford, a heavy man with cruel eyes, presided from an elevated chair. Victoria sat in the front row, her face carefully blank. This emergency session is called to address the unlawful killing of 5 men by Clara Whitfield and her accomplices, Judge Ashford began. Self-defense, Jack said loudly from where he stood, supported by Tom Morrison. You'll have your chance to speak, Mr. Calder. If you're not arrested for your own crimes first, the judge turned to Clara. Miss Whitfield, you stand accused of practicing medicine without a license, moral turpitude, and murder. How do you plead? I plead that this court has no jurisdiction over my medical practice, Your Honor. The judge's eyes narrowed. Explain. Clara stood, holding up a thick legal document. According to Territorial Statute 314, Section 9, and I quote, any person possessing documented medical training from an institution accredited by a state medical board shall be permitted to practice medicine within the territory. The statute says person, Your Honor, not man. Women aren't persons under the law, Samuel protested. Actually, they are, Clara continued. The Territorial Charter, ratified in 1871, explicitly states that all persons residing within the territory are subject to its laws and protected by them. If women aren't persons, then they can't be prosecuted under territorial law. You can't have it both ways, Mr. Dyer. Judge Ashford's face was darkening. This is legal trickery. This is the law, Your Honor. Your law. The law you swore to uphold. Clara held up her diploma. I graduated from Boston Women's Medical Seminary, fully accredited by the Massachusetts Medical Board. Under territorial law, I have every right to practice medicine. The moral turpitude charges, one of the councilmen began, are based on what? That I refuse to marry Mr. Dyer? There's no law requiring women to accept marriage proposals. That I work for a living? The territory has no laws against women's employment. The crowd was murmuring now, many nodding in agreement. Samuel stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. She's a killer. Who was defending herself against men you hired to kidnap or kill her, Jack said. We have witnesses. Lies. Actually, a new voice said from the back, it's true. Everyone turned to see the surviving attacker from the night before, flanked by 2 federal marshals. Clara recognized the distinctive badges and felt a surge of hope. Marshal Thompson, Federal Territory Division, the lead marshal announced. We've been investigating reports of corruption and attempted murder in Dry Creek. This man, he indicated the survivor, has agreed to testify in exchange for reduced charges. The witness, pale and bandaged, spoke clearly. Samuel Dyer paid us $5,000 to kill the woman and anyone protecting her. Cole Harrigan was in charge. When the first attempt failed, we tried again last night. The hall erupted. Samuel was shouting denials, Judge Ashford was banging for order, and the crowd was growing increasingly hostile toward Samuel's faction. Furthermore, Marshal Thompson continued, we have evidence that Judge Ashford has been taking bribes to influence his decisions, including this case. Victoria Ashford stood slowly. I can confirm that, Marshal. I have documents proving my husband's corruption, which I'll gladly provide. Judge Ashford's face went from red to white. Victoria, you bitch! That's enough, Marshal Thompson said. Judge Ashford, you're under arrest. Samuel Dyer, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Samuel pulled a gun, wildly swinging it toward Clara. This is your fault. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. Samuel jerked and fell, his gun firing harmlessly into the ceiling. Jack, Tom Morrison, and Marshal Thompson all stood with smoking weapons. Well, Marshal Thompson said dryly, that saves the territory the cost of a trial. In the chaos that followed, Clara found herself at the center of a celebration. The corrupt council members fled town, Judge Ashford was taken into custody, and Marshal Thompson officially confirmed Clara's right to practice medicine anywhere in the territory. You've done something important here, he told her privately. Word of this will spread. Other territories will have to examine their own laws. You've opened a door that can't be easily closed. As the sun set on that momentous day, Clara stood outside the clinic with Jack, his arm around her for support, though she suspected he needed it more than she did. So what now? He asked. Now I practice medicine without looking over my shoulder. And us? Clara looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd risked everything for her. What do you want there to be? I want to stop running, to build something instead of destroying it, to wake up next to you every morning and know we're both safe. That's a lot of wants. I'm a greedy man. Clara smiled, rising on her toes to kiss him. Good. So am I. The weeks following Samuel's death brought an uneasy peace to Dry Creek. Clara threw herself into her medical practice with renewed vigor, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Jack had taken to sleeping in the clinic's back room, claiming it was to protect medical supplies, but they both knew he was protecting her. His wound had healed well under her care, leaving another scar to add to his collection, but Clara noticed how he still favored his right side, how his hand never strayed far from his gun, even during quiet moments. You're expecting trouble, she said one evening as they closed the clinic. The autumn sun painted the sky crimson, reminding her uncomfortably of blood. Samuel had friends, men who lost money when he died, men who believed what he believed about women knowing their place. Jack checked the windows, a routine that had become automatic. They won't forget. He was right to worry. 3 days later, a woman arrived at the clinic just after dawn, carrying a child whose labored breathing could be heard from the street. Clara recognized her immediately as Maria Santos, wife of one of Samuel's former ranch hands. Please, Maria gasped. My Rosa, she cannot breathe. Clara took the child, noting the characteristic whoop of pertussis. Whooping cough, potentially deadly in someone so young. She immediately began treatment, but as she worked, Maria whispered urgently, My husband, he says I should warn you. Samuel's brother is coming from Texas, Elijah Dyer. He has many men, very bad men. Clara's hands never paused in their work, though her heart rate accelerated. When? Soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe day after. My husband, he doesn't want more killing, but he says Elijah won't stop until you're dead. After stabilizing Rosa and settling her in the clinic's small recovery room, Clara found Jack already preparing. He'd heard everything. We should leave, he said. Tonight. Go somewhere they can't find us. And Rosa? She can't be moved for at least a week. And what about my other patients? Doc Hawkins can handle them. Doc Hawkins is drinking again, Clara said quietly. It was true. The stress of recent events had driven the old physician back to the bottle. Just yesterday, she'd found him passed out in the supply room. Without me, people will die. With you, people will die anyway when Elijah arrives. He's not like Samuel. From what I've heard, he's smarter, more ruthless. He won't make the same mistakes. Clara was about to respond when Tom Morrison burst through the door, face flushed with urgency. Riders approaching from the south. 20, maybe more. Armed to the teeth. Jack grabbed his rifle, checking the load. How far? An hour, maybe less. Get everyone to safety, Jack ordered. Women and children in the church. It's got the thickest walls. Any men willing to fight, position them at the windows of the hotel and general store. Crossfire positions. Tom nodded and ran out. Clara began gathering medical supplies, knowing she'd need them before this day ended. Her hands were steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Clara, Jack said, catching her arm, I need you to go to the church too. Absolutely not. You'll need medical help when the shooting starts. This isn't a debate. You're right. It's not. She pulled free of his grip. This is my fight, Jack. They're coming for me. I won't hide while others die in my place. Before he could argue further, the clinic door opened again, but instead of allies, 3 men entered, guns drawn. They must have circled around, approaching from the north while everyone watched the southern road. Miss Whitfield, the lead man said with mock courtesy. He was tall and lean, with Samuel's same cruel mouth but colder, more intelligent eyes. I'm Elijah Dyer. I believe you murdered my brother. Your brother died attempting to murder me, Claire replied evenly. The federal marshals confirmed it was self-defense. Federal law, Elijah spat. Out here, family law is what matters. Blood for blood. Jack had shifted slightly, positioning himself for a clear shot, but the 2 other men had their weapons trained on him. It was a standoff, and everyone knew the first person to move would likely trigger a bloodbath. Let me make you an offer, Elijah continued. Come with us quietly, and we'll make it quick. Refuse, and we'll burn this town to the ground. Every death will be on your conscience. My conscience is clear, Claire said. Can you say the same? Elijah smiled, an expression devoid of warmth. Conscience is a luxury I've never been able to afford, Miss Whitfield. Now, what will it be? The tension in the room was suffocating. Clara could hear Rosa's labored breathing from the recovery room, could see Jack's finger hovering near his trigger, could feel the weight of the decision crushing down on her. If she went with them, she'd die. If she refused, others would die. It seemed like no choice at all. Then came the sound of horses, many horses, and not from the south, but from the east. Everyone tensed as the thunder of hooves grew louder, closer. Elijah's men exchanged uncertain glances. The clinic door burst open again, and Clara's breath caught. It was Cole Harrigan. But that was impossible. She'd seen him die, seen Jack put 2 bullets in his chest. No, not Cole. Someone who looked remarkably like him, same pale eyes, same cold handsomeness, but younger. Brother, the newcomer said to Elijah, started without me? Just negotiating, Marcus. Miss Whitfield was about to make a decision. Marcus Harrigan studied Clara with interest. So this is the woman who killed Cole. I'm impressed. Not many people could take down my brother. Jack Calder killed your brother, Clara said, after you distracted him with that clever lie about the money. Oh yes. The survivor told us everything before we cut his throat. Marcus moved closer, and Clara could smell gunpowder and leather on him. You're quite resourceful, Miss Whitfield. In another life, I might have admired that. In this life, you're going to kill me regardless. True, but the manner of your death, well, that's still negotiable. Jack spoke for the first time, his voice deadly calm. Touch her, and I'll kill every last one of you. Marcus laughed. The famous Jack Calder. Cole spoke of you, said you were the best he'd ever seen. Shall we test that? Enough games, Elijah interrupted. Miss Whitfield, you have 30 seconds to decide. Come quietly or watch your town burn. Clara's mind raced. She needed time, needed to think, needed... Rosa coughed from the recovery room, a harsh, desperate sound. Without thinking, Clara moved toward the sound. I need to check on my patient. Stop, Elijah commanded. Shoot me if you want, but that child needs immediate care or she'll die. She pushed past the gunman, hearing Jack's sharp intake of breath, feeling the weapons tracking her movement. In the recovery room, Rosa was indeed in distress, her breathing increasingly labored. Clara quickly prepared a steam treatment, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. What are you doing? Marcus had followed her, curiosity overcoming caution. Saving a life. Something you might try sometime. Life, death, it's all the same in the end. If you really believed that, you wouldn't be here seeking vengeance for your brother. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching as Clara worked. Rosa's breathing gradually eased and color returned to her small face. You really are a doctor, he said, sounding surprised. Yes, a good one. And if you kill me, children like Rosa will die because no one else in this territory has the training to save them. Then they'll die. The world's full of death, Miss Whitfield. A few more won't matter. Clara turned to face him fully, and something in her expression made him step back. They matter to their mothers. They matter to their fathers. They matter to me. Sentiment will get you killed. And lack of it has already killed you. You just haven't stopped moving yet. Before Marcus could respond, gunfire erupted outside. Not scattered shots, but a concentrated volley. Elijah cursed and moved to the window. It's Morrison and his men, one of the gunmen reported. They've got us pinned. More gunfire, from multiple directions now. The town hadn't waited for Clara's decision. They'd chosen to fight. Damn it, Elijah snarled. Marcus, take the woman. We're leaving. Marcus grabbed Clara's arm, but Jack was already moving. His gun came up impossibly fast, and his first shot took out the man covering him. The second gunman turned, firing, and Jack grunted as a bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. But even falling, he fired again, and the gunman dropped. Elijah raised his weapon toward Jack, but Clara threw herself forward, her medical bag catching him in the face. He staggered back, and she pulled the derringer from her pocket, pressing it against his throat. Nobody move, she commanded. Marcus had his gun out, but hadn't fired. He seemed almost amused by the situation. Well played, Miss Whitfield. But you only have 2 shots in that little gun, and there are more of us than that. Then I'll have to make them count. The standoff stretched, gunfire still raging outside. Jack had pulled himself to cover, blood streaming from his shoulder, but his gun still steady. Elijah remained frozen with Clara's derringer at his throat. Interesting dilemma, Marcus observed. Your townspeople are fighting mine. People are dying. All for you. How does that feel, Doctor? Like responsibility, Clara replied. Something you'd understand if you'd ever built anything instead of just destroying. The clinic door opened again, and Pete Morrison entered, badge gleaming and rifle ready. Behind him, several armed townsmen filled the doorway. Situation's under control outside, Pete announced. Your men are either dead or surrendering, Dyer. Elijah's face contorted with rage. This isn't over. Clara pressed the derringer harder against his throat. Yes, it is. You're going to leave Dry Creek, Mr. Dyer. You and Mr. Harrigan and any of your men still breathing. You're going to leave and never come back. Or what? You'll kill me? You don't have it in you. Clara met his eyes steadily. You're right. I'm a doctor. I save lives. But Jack Calder doesn't have that restriction, and neither does Sheriff Morrison, and neither do the 20 armed men outside who are very grateful I saved their children and wives. So the question is, do you want to test their restraint? Elijah looked around the room, calculating odds. Marcus hadn't moved, still watching with that strange amusement. This is fascinating, Marcus said. A woman holding the infamous Elijah Dyer at gunpoint. Cole would have enjoyed the irony. Shut up, Marcus. I think we should accept the lady's terms, Marcus continued. We came for vengeance, but the cost is becoming excessive. Bad for business. She killed Samuel. Samuel got himself killed by underestimating her. Let's not repeat his mistake. Elijah's jaw clenched, but Clara could see him reconsidering. He was smarter than his brother, smart enough to recognize a losing position. Fine, he ground out. We leave. But this debt is paid, Clara interrupted. Your brother tried to own me, then tried to kill me. He failed at both. That's not murder, it's justice. She stepped back, keeping the derringer trained on him. Pete Morrison and his men moved in, disarming Elijah and Marcus. Jack had struggled to his feet, leaning against the wall, but still alert. Get them horses, Pete ordered. They've got 5 minutes to clear town limits. As Elijah was escorted out, Marcus lingered for a moment. You know, Miss Whitfield, you're wasted on this little town. You should come to San Francisco or Chicago, places where a woman of your talents could truly flourish. My place is here, Mr. Harrigan. Pity. He tipped his hat. If you ever change your mind, look me up. I could use a doctor who can hold a gun that steady. After they were gone, Clara rushed to Jack, examining his shoulder wound. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing major vessels, but he'd lost significant blood. You need surgery, she said. I need whiskey, he countered, but allowed her to lead him to the examination table. As she worked, Pete Morrison filled them in on the battle outside. Lost 2 men, wounded 5 more. But Dyer's gang took the worst of it. 8 dead, rest scattered. Will they come back? Clara asked, suturing Jack's wound. Doubt it. Elijah's practical above all else. He made his play, lost, and he'll accept it. Marcus Harrigan, now he's a different story. But I don't think we're his priority. Doc Hawkins stumbled in then, clearly drunk but trying to help. Clara gently but firmly sent him home, then continued treating the wounded as they were brought in. She worked through the night, Jack assisting despite his injury once she'd bound his shoulder. By dawn, the clinic was full of recovering men, and Clara was exhausted beyond measure. She stepped outside for air and found the town strangely quiet. Then she saw them, dozens of people, men and women, standing silently in the street. What's happening? She asked Martha Brennan. They're here for you, Martha said softly, to say thank you. One by one they approached. Tom Morrison shook her hand silently. Sarah Miller hugged her. Davies from the mine simply nodded, but his eyes were wet. Even people she barely knew, people who had initially opposed her presence, came to offer their gratitude. You stood for us, an elderly woman said. Now we stand for you. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. She'd come to Dry Creek seeking freedom and had found something more: community, purpose, belonging. Inside the clinic, she found Jack trying to sit up. You should see this, he said, gesturing to the window. Outside, a group of men were erecting something in front of the clinic. As Clara watched, a sign took shape. Dry Creek Medical Center, Dr. Clara Whitfield, Chief Physician. Doc Hawkins agreed to it last night, Jack explained. Said it was time to make it official. You're the town doctor now, legally and officially. And you, Clara asked, what will you do now? Jack was quiet for a moment. Depends. That offer to stop running, to build something, does it still stand? Always. Then I suppose I'll have to find honest work. Maybe as the doctor's assistant. I've gotten good at following your medical orders. Clara laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. I can't pay much. I wasn't thinking of monetary compensation. She moved closer, careful of his wounded shoulder. What kind of compensation did you have in mind? The kind that involves waking up next to you every morning. That can be arranged. They kissed then, gentle despite everything they'd been through, or perhaps because of it. When they pulled apart, Clara saw their reflection in the window, battered, bloodied, but unbroken. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Victoria Ashford arrived in a simple wagon, her elegant clothes replaced with practical traveling attire. I'm leaving for San Francisco, she announced. My husband's trial exposed many things, including accounts he'd hidden. I have enough to start over. I'm glad, Clara said sincerely. You deserve freedom. As do you. Which is why I wanted to give you this before I left. Victoria handed her a thick envelope. It's correspondence from the territorial governor. He's heard about recent events and wants to establish a formal medical college here, with you as the founding instructor. Clara stared at the letter in shock. A medical college? Here? Why not? You've already proven women can be doctors. Now prove they can teach others. The territory is offering funding and full accreditation. I don't know what to say. Victoria smiled. Say yes. Make Dry Creek a place where women come to become what they were told they couldn't be. After Victoria left, Clara shared the news with Jack and Hawkins. The old doctor actually sobered up instantly. A medical college, he breathed. Here. My God, Clara, do you know what this means? It means a lot of work. It means a legacy, Jack corrected. Something that will outlast all of us. Over the following weeks, as the town recovered from the violence, plans began to take shape. The abandoned hotel on the edge of town would be converted into dormitories and classrooms. Doc Hawkins, inspired by the project, stopped drinking entirely and threw himself into developing curriculum. Even Tom Morrison got involved, offering to teach anatomy based on his experience as a hunter. "Never thought I'd be a professor," he said with a grin. Applications began arriving before they'd even officially announced the school. Young women from all over the territory and beyond, drawn by the story of the lady doctor who'd stood up to those who would keep her down. One evening, as Clara and Jack walked through the building that would become the college, she stopped at a window overlooking the town. "It doesn't feel real," she said. "Which part? The medical college, surviving multiple assassination attempts, or having me as your devoted assistant? All of it. 6 months ago, I was just another woman fleeing a bad situation. Now you're changing the world. That's an exaggeration." "Is it? How many girls in this territory will grow up knowing they can be doctors because of you? How many women will refuse to accept no because you didn't?" Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Sure you could have. Might have taken longer, but you'd have found a way. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Clara Whitfield." "Clara Calder," she corrected softly. Jack went very still. "What?" "Well, if you're going to be my assistant, we should probably make it official. Unless you have objections to taking your wife's name." "Clara." His voice was rough with emotion. "Are you proposing to me?" "I suppose I am, though I should warn you, I'm not very traditional." "I noticed that when you held a gun to Elijah Dyer's throat." He turned her to face him. "Yes, of course, yes. Though people will talk." "Let them. They talk anyway." They were married a month later in a ceremony that brought together the entire town. Pete Morrison officiated, having gotten himself certified for the occasion. Martha Brennan stood as Clara's witness, while Tom Morrison stood for Jack. Doc Hawkins gave Clara away, sober and proud. "You've made an honest man of me," Jack said as they danced at the reception. "Have I? You're still wearing that gun. Old habits. Besides, someone needs to protect the territory's first female medical professor. And someone needs to make sure that protector doesn't get himself shot. Again." The medical college opened 3 months later with 12 students, all women, ranging in age from 17 to 43. Clara stood before them on the first day of classes, remembering her own first day at Boston Women's Medical Seminary. "You're here because you refuse to accept limitations," she began, "because you believe that healing is a calling that knows no gender. The road ahead will be difficult. You'll face doubt, discrimination, and outright hostility. But you'll also save lives, bring comfort to the suffering, and prove that competence matters more than convention." One student raised her hand. "Dr. Calder, what happens when we graduate?" "Will people accept us as doctors?" Clara smiled. "Some will, some won't. But every patient you save, every child you deliver, every wound you heal makes it harder for them to deny your worth. And you won't be alone. There are 12 of you now. In a year, there will be more. Eventually, there will be too many of us to ignore." The early days of the college were challenging. Equipment was scarce, textbooks limited, and not everyone in town was comfortable with the idea of so many educated women in one place. But support came from unexpected sources. The mine donated funds after Clara saved 3 more workers from a cave-in. Ranchers who'd initially opposed her sent their daughters to learn. Even the territorial government increased funding after the governor's wife visited and declared the institution essential to the territory's progress. Jack adapted to his new role with surprising grace, managing the college's security and logistics while continuing to assist Clara in the clinic. He also taught courses in emergency field medicine, drawing on his military experience. "Never thought I'd be teaching instead of shooting," he said one evening as they reviewed student progress reports. "Do you miss it? The excitement? The danger?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I see what we're building here, and I realize this is its own kind of fight. Quieter, maybe, but more important." A year passed. The first class was preparing for their final examinations when news arrived that shook the community. Marcus Harrigan had been killed in San Francisco, shot by a rival gang leader. With his death, the last real threat to Clara's safety died too. "It's over," Jack said when they heard. "Really over." "No," Clara corrected, watching her students practice suturing techniques. It's just beginning. The final examinations were held publicly, with physicians from Denver and San Francisco brought in as external examiners. All 12 women passed, some with distinction. At the graduation ceremony, Clara stood before a crowd that included territorial officials, journalists from Eastern newspapers, and families who'd traveled hundreds of miles to see their daughters become doctors. Today, 12 women joined the ranks of qualified physicians, she announced. But more than that, 12 pioneers go forth to change the world. They'll face challenges we can't imagine, overcome obstacles we haven't dreamed of. But they'll do it with the knowledge that they earned their place through merit, not privilege, through determination, not default. As she handed out diplomas, Clara caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Victoria Ashford had returned from San Francisco, elegantly dressed, but with a new confidence in her bearing. "I had to see this," Victoria said afterward. "Had to see what my small contribution helped create." "It wasn't small. Your courage in exposing your husband made all of this possible." "Perhaps. But you're the one who stood in that courtroom and demanded to be recognized as a person. That moment changed everything." That evening, as the celebration continued, Clara found a quiet moment with Jack on the porch of what was now their home, a modest house behind the medical college. "Any regrets?" she asked. "About what?" "Settling down, becoming respectable, marrying a woman who insists on keeping her maiden name professionally." Jack pulled her closer. "My only regret is that it took so long to find you." "That's unbearably romantic for a former gunslinger. You've corrupted me with your civilizing influence." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Dry Creek. The town had changed dramatically in 2 years. New businesses had opened to cater to the students and faculty. A library had been established. Women walked the streets with a confidence that would have been unthinkable before. "Do you ever think about Samuel Dyer?" Jack asked suddenly. "Sometimes. I think about how different things might have been if he'd wanted a partner instead of property. He could never have accepted you as you are." "No. But his death still weighs on me sometimes. All the deaths do. That's what makes you different from men like Marcus Harrigan or me in my younger days. The weight matters to you." "Didn't it matter to you?" "Not enough. Not until I met someone worth protecting instead of just surviving." A student approached, hesitant to interrupt. "Dr. Calder? There's a patient at the clinic. A difficult birth. We've tried everything we learned, but..." Clara was already moving. "Show me." At the clinic, she found a scene of controlled chaos. The patient was a young woman, barely 16, in obstructed labor. The students had done everything right, but the baby was positioned badly, and the mother was weakening. "Watch carefully," Clara told the students as she examined the patient. "This is a situation that requires both skill and intuition. Sometimes you have to trust your hands more than your textbooks." For the next 2 hours, she worked with intense focus, manually repositioning the baby while monitoring the mother's vital signs. The students watched in awe as she performed techniques they'd only read about, her movements confident despite the difficulty. Finally, a healthy cry filled the clinic. The baby, a girl, was placed in her exhausted but elated mother's arms. "You saved us both," the young mother whispered. "We all did," Clara said, gesturing to the students. "Every hand here contributed." Later, as they walked home, Jack said, "You know what you did there? You didn't just save 2 lives. You showed those students that everything they're learning has a purpose. They need to see that, to know that the struggles are worth it." "Like yours were?" Clara stopped walking, turning to face him. "My struggles brought me here, brought me to you, brought me to this work that matters more than anything I could have imagined. So yes, they were worth it. Even Samuel, even the violence. I wish it could have been different. But if that was the price for all this, for changing what's possible for women in this territory and beyond, then yes, even that." They resumed walking, and Clara noticed lights still burning in the college dormitories. Students studying, practicing, preparing to go out and face a world that wasn't quite ready for them, but would have to adjust anyway. "You started something that can't be stopped," Jack observed, following her gaze. "We started it," she corrected. and it's far from finished. 3 months later, Clara received a letter that would change everything again. The federal government was establishing a National Medical Standards Board and wanted her to serve as the first female member. It would mean traveling to Washington several times a year, mean fighting battles on a larger stage. "You have to accept," Jack said immediately when she showed him the letter. "It would mean leaving you, leaving the college, for a few weeks at a time. Clara, this is a chance to influence medical education across the entire country, to ensure that what we've built here spreads everywhere." "What about the college?" "Doc Hawkins and I can manage things. Besides, some of your graduates are already asking about teaching positions. Let them step up." Clara reread the letter, her mind racing with possibilities. "They'll fight me every step of the way. The medical establishment won't welcome a woman, especially one from a frontier college. Since when has that stopped you?" She looked at him, this man who'd transformed from gunslinger to partner, who'd stood beside her through violence and victory alike. "You really think I should do this?" "I think you were born to do this. I think every girl who dreams of being more than what she's told she can be needs you to do this." Clara made her decision. She wrote her acceptance that night, and within a month she was on a train to Washington armed with data from the college, testimonials from patients, and the unshakable conviction that had carried her through everything else. The first board meeting was as hostile as she'd expected. 12 men in expensive suits looked at her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright disdain. "Mrs. Calder," the board president began, deliberately using her married name despite her professional preference. "While we appreciate your enthusiasm, surely you must see that women lack the physical and mental fortitude for the rigors of medical practice." Clara stood, commanding the room's attention. "Gentlemen, I've delivered babies in blizzards, performed surgery by candlelight, and treated gunshot wounds while under fire myself. I've established and run a medical college that has produced 12 qualified physicians in its first year, all of whom are now successfully practicing. If that doesn't demonstrate fortitude, I'd be curious to know what does." Those are exceptional circumstances. Medicine is exceptional circumstances. Every patient, every diagnosis, every treatment requires us to rise above the ordinary. Gender has nothing to do with it. The debate continued for hours, but Clara held her ground, armed with statistics, case studies, and an unyielding determination. When she finally left Washington, she hadn't won every battle, but she'd forced them to acknowledge her credentials and include her recommendations in their preliminary standards. The train ride home seemed endless, but when she finally arrived in Dry Creek, the entire town was waiting at the station. Jack stood at the front, his smile brighter than the desert sun. "How did it go?" he asked as she fell into his arms. "They listened. They didn't want to, but they listened. That's all we need. Once they start listening, they can't pretend we don't exist." That night, in their bedroom, Clara finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion of the past weeks. "I'm tired, Jack. Tired of fighting for every inch of ground." "I know, but look what you've built while fighting." He gestured out the window toward the college, where lights still burned. "Those students don't have to fight as hard because you fought first. Their students will have to fight even less. Eventually, it won't be a fight at all." "You really believe that?" "I believe in you." "That's enough." As Clara drifted off to sleep, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate woman fleeing an arranged marriage to a professor, doctor, and now National Medical Board member. Every step had been a battle, but every victory had opened doors for others. The next morning brought new challenges. A typhoid outbreak in a mining camp required immediate attention. Clara took 3 of her advanced students loading a wagon with medical supplies. "This is your real test," she told them as they rode toward the camp. "Everything else has been preparation for moments like this." The camp was in chaos when they arrived. 20 men were already sick, and more were falling ill by the hour. Clara immediately implemented quarantine procedures, something she'd learned from the latest medical journals, but which seemed like magic to the miners. "You're that lady doctor from Dry Creek," one miner said wonderingly, "the one who stood up to the Dyer gang." "I'm a doctor who happens to be from Dry Creek," Clara corrected. "Now, let's focus on keeping you alive." For 5 days, she and her students battled the outbreak. They lost 3 men, but saved dozens more. When they finally returned to Dry Creek, exhausted but victorious, Clara found another letter waiting. This one was from a group of women in Denver who wanted to establish their own medical college. "They want my advice," she told Jack, amazed. "They're calling me a pioneer." "You are a pioneer. You crossed a frontier that had nothing to do with geography." More letters followed. From women seeking to enter medical school, from established doctors wanting to understand her teaching methods, from journalists wanting to tell her story. Clara answered them all, even as she continued her duties at the college and clinic. One evening, as she was preparing lectures, Jack brought her a newspaper from San Francisco. The headline read, "Lady Doctor Revolutionizes Medical Education in the West." "Revolution seems a bit dramatic," Clara said. "Does it? 2 years ago, there were no female doctors in this territory. Now there are 15, with more graduating every year. If that's not revolution, what is?" Before Clara could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. A wagon had arrived, and a woman was being helped down, clearly in distress. Clara recognized her immediately, despite the years that had passed. It was her sister Elizabeth from Boston. "Clara!" Elizabeth gasped, clutching her heavily pregnant belly. "I didn't know where else to go." Clara caught her sister as she swayed, immediately assessing her condition with practiced eyes. Elizabeth was pale, her breathing shallow, and there was a telltale swelling in her ankles that suggested preeclampsia. Without hesitation, Clara and Jack helped her into the clinic, where Clara began a thorough examination. "How far along are you?" Clara asked, checking Elizabeth's blood pressure. 8 months, maybe more. I've lost track." Elizabeth's voice was hollow, defeated in a way that made Clara's heart ache. "Robert threw me out when he discovered I was pregnant. Said it couldn't be his, though God knows I've never been with another man." "Robert Ashworth? You married Robert Ashworth?" Clara remembered him from Boston society, a banker with cold eyes and a reputation for cruelty that everyone politely ignored. "Father arranged it after you left. Said one daughter had already disgraced the family. He wouldn't allow another to remain unmarried." Elizabeth gripped Clara's hand. "I wanted to write, but Robert wouldn't allow it. Then when he cast me out, I had nowhere else to go. I remembered your letters to Aunt Margaret about Dry Creek, about your medical college. I spent the last of my money getting here." Clara's examination revealed what she'd feared. Elizabeth's blood pressure was dangerously high. The baby was in distress, and without immediate intervention, she could lose both of them. She turned to Jack, who'd been standing quietly by the door. "Get my advanced students, all of them. And Doc Hawkins if he's sober. This is going to be complicated." As Jack left, Clara held Elizabeth's hand. "I'm going to take care of you. You're safe now." "Safe," Elizabeth repeated, tears streaming down her face. "I haven't felt safe in 3 years. Robert, Clara, the things he did. And everyone knew, everyone saw the bruises, but no one said anything because he was Robert Ashworth and I was just his wife." Clara felt a familiar rage building, the same fury that had driven her to leave Boston, to fight Samuel Dyer, to stand against everyone who believed women were property. But now wasn't the time for anger. Now was the time for medicine. The students arrived quickly, their faces serious as Clara explained the situation. "Severe preeclampsia, possibly evolving to eclampsia. The baby needs to be delivered immediately, but the mother's condition makes surgery extremely risky." "What about inducing labor?" suggested Margaret Hayes, one of her brightest students. "Too dangerous with her blood pressure this high." "We need to stabilize her first, then attempt a cesarean section." Clara had only performed the procedure twice before, both times successfully, but never on someone whose life mattered to her personally. For the next 2 hours, Clara and her team worked to bring Elizabeth's blood pressure down while monitoring the baby's increasingly distressed heartbeat. Jack returned with news that made Clara's blood run cold. "There's a man at the hotel asking about a pregnant woman who might have come through town." Well-dressed Eastern accent. "Says he's her husband looking for his runaway wife." Robert Ashworth had followed Elizabeth. Clara's hands clenched into fists, but she forced herself to focus. "He can't take her. She's my patient, and she's in no condition to be moved." "Legally, though," Doc Hawkins began, having arrived sober and ready to assist. "Legally, she's under my medical care, and any attempt to remove her would constitute endangerment." Clara turned to Jack. Can you handle this? Jack's smile was dangerous. I'll have a conversation with Mr. Ashworth about the inadvisability of disturbing medical procedures. As Jack left, Claire prepared for surgery. Elizabeth was barely conscious, but she gripped Clara's hand weakly. If something happens to me, save the baby. I'm saving both of you, Clara said firmly. That's not a negotiation. The surgery was the most challenging of Clara's career. Elizabeth's condition deteriorated rapidly once they began, her body seizing twice during the procedure. But Clara's hands remained steady, her students responding to her commands with precision born from months of training. When she finally lifted the baby, a healthy girl despite everything, from Elizabeth's womb, the entire room seemed to exhale collectively. She's beautiful, Margaret breathed, cleaning the infant while Clara worked to stop Elizabeth's hemorrhaging. The bleeding was severe, more than Clara had anticipated. She worked frantically, applying every technique she knew, aware that she was losing her sister despite everything. More pressure here, she commanded, showing a student where to compress, and prepare a transfusion. From whom? Hawkins asked. From me. We have the same blood type. I tested years ago in Boston. Clara, that's dangerous. So is letting her die. Clara was already rolling up her sleeve. You know how to do this, doctor. We've discussed the technique. The blood transfusion was experimental, something Clara had only read about in European medical journals. But as her blood flowed into Elizabeth's veins, she saw color return to her sister's face, saw her breathing steady. Jack returned as they were finishing, his knuckles slightly bloodied. Mr. Ashworth has decided to return to Boston immediately. He's no longer interested in finding his wife. What did you do? I explained the territorial laws regarding patient care. Very thoroughly. He's a quick learner. Elizabeth survived the night, though it was close several times. Clara never left her side, monitoring her vital signs while the baby, whom Elizabeth named Hope, slept in a makeshift cradle nearby. As dawn broke, Elizabeth finally opened her eyes fully. Clara? I'm here. The baby? Perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a cry that could wake the dead. Clara helped Elizabeth sit up slightly, placing Hope in her arms. You're both going to be fine. Elizabeth studied her daughter's face with wonder and fear. I don't know how to be a mother. Robert always said I was too stupid, too weak. Robert is a liar and a coward who ran back to Boston rather than face consequences for his actions. You're one of the strongest people I know, Lizzie. You survived him. You made it here alone while pregnant, and you survived a surgery that would have killed most people. You'll be a wonderful mother. Over the following weeks, Elizabeth recovered slowly but steadily. She took a room at Martha Brennan's boarding house, paying her way by helping with bookkeeping, a skill she'd developed secretly during her marriage, managing household accounts, while Robert believed her incapable of basic arithmetic. I want to learn, she told Clara one afternoon, watching her sister teach a class on diagnostic techniques. Not medicine, I don't have your gift for that. But something. I want to be more than what I was told I could be. What interests you? Law, Elizabeth said, surprising them both. All those years with Robert, I read his law books when he was gone. I understood them, Clara. The logic, the arguments, the precedents. I want to know enough to ensure no woman has to stay with a man like Robert because she has no legal recourse. Clara smiled, remembering her own hunger for knowledge, for purpose. There's no law school here, but Judge Matthews, he replaced Ashford, might take you as a clerk. You could read law under his supervision. Would he accept a woman? He accepted women doctors. I think he might surprise you. Indeed, Judge Matthews proved surprisingly progressive, perhaps influenced by his own daughter's desire to pursue education. He agreed to let Elizabeth read law under his guidance, making her the first woman in the territory to formally study legal principles. Meanwhile, Clara's medical college continued to grow. The second class had 20 students, drawn from as far away as California and Texas. The curriculum expanded too, incorporating new techniques Clara learned from her trips to Washington and correspondence with European physicians. One particularly significant addition came from an unexpected source. A Chinese herbalist named Wei Chen approached Clara, offering to share traditional healing methods his family had practiced for generations. Western medicine is powerful, he said carefully, aware that many in town viewed him with suspicion. But Eastern medicine has wisdom too, perhaps together. Clara had seen enough frontier medicine to know that healing came in many forms. She invited Wei Chen to give guest lectures, causing controversy, but also breakthrough treatments for conditions Western medicine struggled with. "You're always pushing boundaries," Jack observed one evening as they watched Wei Chen teach students about acupuncture points. "Boundaries are just lines someone drew saying, 'Stop here.' I've never been good at stopping. It's going to cause problems, and people already whisper about the college being too radical. Let them whisper. Results speak louder than rumors." Those results came dramatically when a diphtheria outbreak struck the town's children. Traditional treatments were failing, children dying despite Clara's best efforts. In desperation, she combined Western antitoxin therapy with Wei Chen's herbal preparations. The combination worked better than either alone, saving children who would have certainly died. "Witchcraft," some muttered, but their voices were drowned out by parents grateful to have their children alive. The success drew attention from medical institutions across the country. The New England Journal of Medicine requested a paper on the combined treatment approach. Clara wrote it with Wei Chen as co-author, causing sensation in medical circles, not just for the treatment itself, but for crediting a Chinese herbalist as an equal contributor. "You've done it again," Victoria Ashford wrote from San Francisco, where she'd established herself as a successful legal advocate for women's property rights. "You forced them to acknowledge that healing doesn't belong exclusively to white men with fancy degrees." But success brought new challenges. A group of traditional physicians, led by a doctor, Cornelius Blackwood from Denver, arrived to investigate the college's teaching methods and qualifications. "This is highly irregular," Blackwood declared, reviewing the curriculum. "Female students, Chinese medicine, experimental procedures, this isn't medical education, it's dangerous experimentation." "Every advancement in medicine was once considered dangerous experimentation," Clara countered. "Anesthesia, antiseptic technique, vaccination, all were opposed by traditionalists who preferred familiar suffering to unfamiliar solutions." "You're comparing yourself to Lister and Jenner." "I'm comparing closed-mindedness to closed-mindedness. Would you like to see our success rates, our patient outcomes, or would you prefer to simply declare us dangerous without examining evidence?" Blackwood chose to examine the evidence, confident he'd find failure. Instead, he found meticulous records showing outcomes equal to or better than traditional institutions. He watched students perform procedures with skill that matched any Eastern hospital. Most damning to his position, he saw patients, men and women, specifically requesting treatment from Clara's graduates rather than traditionally trained physicians. "This is an anomaly," he insisted. "These results can't be replicated elsewhere." "Then let's replicate them," Clara challenged. "Send us your most difficult cases. Let my students treat them under observation. If we fail, I'll close the college. If we succeed, you write a letter to the American Medical Association endorsing our methods." It was a dangerous gamble. Jack tried to talk her out of it, as did Hawkins and even Elizabeth, who'd become fiercely protective of her sister's legacy. "You have nothing to prove," Elizabeth argued. "The college is successful, the students are thriving, and none of it matters if the medical establishment refuses to recognize their credentials. These women need more than my approval. They need acceptance from the broader medical community, or they'll always be fighting just to practice." Blackwood accepted the challenge, bringing 3 cases he considered hopeless. The first was a child with a tumor traditional surgeons deemed inoperable. Margaret Hayes, now in her final year, studied the case and proposed a novel approach using techniques Clara had learned from a German surgeon's recent publication. "The risk is significant," Margaret admitted to the patient's parents. "But without surgery, he has perhaps 2 months. With it, he might have years." The parents, desperate, agreed. Margaret performed the surgery with Clara assisting, a reversal of their usual roles that Clara insisted upon to demonstrate her students' capability. The tumor came out cleanly. The child survived and thrived. The second case was a woman with hysteria, that catch-all diagnosis male doctors used for any female complaint they couldn't understand. Elizabeth, who'd been attending medical lectures despite her legal studies, suggested the symptoms might be physical rather than psychological. "Look at her thyroid," Elizabeth pointed out. "The swelling, the mood changes, the tremors. It could be hyperthyroidism." tests confirmed Elizabeth's hypothesis. Treatment with iodine compounds resolved the hysteria within weeks. The third case was an elderly man with chronic pain no treatment had touched. Wei Chen examined him using traditional diagnostic methods, identifying energy blockages Western medicine didn't recognize. His combination of acupuncture and herbs brought the man his first relief in years. Blackwood watched it all, his worldview crumbling with each success. On his last day in Dry Creek, he sat in Clara's office, looking older than when he'd arrived. "I came here to prove you were a fraud," he admitted. "I leave understanding that I'm the one who's been fraudulent, claiming medicine as the exclusive province of men like me." "Medicine belongs to anyone who can heal," Clara said gently. "That's all I've ever argued." Blackwood wrote his letter to the AMA. It caused an uproar, with many calling for his censure. But others, particularly younger physicians, began to pay attention. Applications to Clara's college doubled, then tripled. She had to turn away qualified candidates simply for lack of space. "We need to expand," she told Jack one evening as they reviewed applications. "Build more dormitories, more classrooms, hire more instructors." "That takes money we don't have." "Then we'll find it." The solution came from unexpected quarters. Judge Matthews, impressed by Elizabeth's legal knowledge and grateful for Clara saving his daughter from typhoid, introduced Clara to territorial legislators. After hearing her presentation on the economic benefits of medical education, the jobs created, the lives saved, the reputation brought to the territory, they approved funding for expansion. Construction began immediately, with Jack overseeing the project. He discovered an unexpected talent for organization and logistics, skills perhaps developed during his military service but refined in peace. "You're becoming respectable," Clara teased as she watched him review architectural plans. "Don't tell anyone." "I have a reputation to maintain." "As what? The reformed gunslinger turned medical college administrator? Has a certain ring to it." The expansion was half complete when news arrived that would change everything again. The governor was establishing a territorial medical board and wanted Clara to serve as its first president, the first woman in any territory or state to hold such a position. "You can't refuse this," Elizabeth said immediately. She'd passed her legal examinations and was now practicing law, specializing in women's rights and medical malpractice. "This is a chance to institutionalize everything you've fought for. It's also a massive responsibility. Every decision I make will be scrutinized. Every mistake used as evidence that women shouldn't hold such positions." "Then don't make mistakes," Jack said simply, "or at least don't make ones they can use against you." Clara accepted the position, adding yet another role to her already overwhelming responsibilities. But she thrived on the challenge, using her position to establish standards that emphasize competence over convention, results over tradition. One of her first acts was to require all practicing physicians in the territory to pass a basic competency examination. The howls of protest were immediate and fierce. "You can't test men who've been practicing for decades," one elderly doctor complained. "Why not? If they're competent, they'll pass. If they're not, shouldn't we know that?" The testing revealed what Clara had suspected. Many frontier doctors were woefully undertrained, relying on outdated or dangerous practices. She instituted mandatory continuing education, bringing in experts to teach new techniques. "You're revolutionizing medicine in the entire territory," the governor told her during one of her reports to the capital. "Other territories are watching, some considering similar reforms." "Good. Medicine advances through shared knowledge, not hoarded secrets." But the responsibilities were taking their toll. Clara was exhausted, working 18-hour days between the college, clinic, and board duties. Jack watched her with growing concern. "You're going to work yourself to death," he said one night, finding her asleep at her desk over patient files. "There's so much to do, and you don't have to do it all yourself. You've trained dozens of capable physicians. Let them help." He was right, Clara realized. She'd been so focused on fighting for acceptance that she'd forgotten to actually accept the help available. She began delegating more, trusting her graduates and students with responsibilities she'd previously hoarded. The change came just in time. Clara discovered she was pregnant, a development that both thrilled and terrified her. How could she manage everything while growing a child? How would the medical establishment react to a pregnant medical board president? They'll react however they react, Jack said when she voiced her fears, and we'll handle it together, like we always do. Elizabeth was ecstatic. A baby! Oh, Clara, little Hope needs a cousin to play with. The pregnancy became public knowledge when Clara started showing, causing exactly the controversy she'd feared. Letters poured in, some supportive, but many declaring that pregnancy proved women were too controlled by biology to hold positions of authority. Clara responded by continuing to work, teaching and treating patients well into her 8th month. When male colleagues suggested she should be confined for her delicate condition, she performed a complex surgery the next day, proving that pregnancy didn't diminish capability. "You're making a statement," Martha Brennan observed, watching Clara teach a packed lecture hall despite being heavily pregnant. "I'm living my life," Clara corrected. "If that makes a statement, so be it." The baby came early, during a board meeting in the territorial capital. Clara had been arguing for standardized licensing when the contractions started. She finished her presentation before mentioning she was in labor. "You've been in labor this entire meeting?" the governor asked, aghast. "Early labor." "I had important points to make." She gave birth 6 hours later to a son they named Thomas, after Tom Morrison, who'd stood by them from the beginning. Jack was present for the delivery, having learned enough from years of assisting to be genuinely helpful rather than merely worried. "He's perfect," Jack whispered, holding his son for the first time. "He's ours," Clara corrected, exhausted but euphoric. "That's better than perfect." The territorial newspapers had a field day with the story of the medical board president who finished a meeting while in labor. Some called it irresponsible, others heroic. Clara ignored them all, focused on the dual challenges of new motherhood and her various responsibilities. Elizabeth proved invaluable during this time, moving in temporarily to help with Thomas while managing her own growing legal practice in Young Hope. The sisters had grown closer through shared struggles, their bond strengthened by understanding what each had overcome. "We're quite a pair," Elizabeth said one evening, watching Hope and Thomas sleep side by side. The Whitfield sisters who refused to know their place. "Calder sisters now," Claire reminded her, "though I kept Whitfield professionally." "And I took Matthews," Elizabeth added with a slight blush. Judge Matthews' son, a kind widower named James, had been courting her for months. They'd married quietly the previous week. "Are you happy?" Clara asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible. James sees me as a partner, not property. He's proud of my legal work, encourages my ambitions. It's everything marriage should be, but rarely is." Their conversation was interrupted by urgent knocking. A young man Clara didn't recognize stood at the door, travel-stained and exhausted. "Dr. Calder?" "I've ridden from Silver Creek. There's been a mine explosion. Dozens injured, maybe dead. They need you." Clara was already reaching for her medical bag when Jack stopped her. "You gave birth 2 weeks ago. You're in no condition. I'm the most experienced trauma surgeon in the territory. Those men need me. Then I'm coming with you." They rode through the night, Clara ignoring the physical discomfort that would have stopped most women so soon after childbirth. The scene at Silver Creek was catastrophic. The mine entrance had collapsed, trapping 40 men. Those who'd been pulled out were badly injured, overwhelming the small local clinic. Clara immediately took charge, triaging patients with the efficiency of someone who'd faced mass casualties before. She performed surgery after surgery, saving men others had given up for dead. Jack worked beside her, as did Margaret Hayes, who'd been visiting nearby, and rushed to help. "You shouldn't be here," Margaret said quietly, noticing Clara's pallor. "Neither should these men, yet here we all are." For 3 days, Clara worked almost without rest. She saved 32 of the 40 trapped miners, a survival rate that should have been impossible given the severity of injuries. When she finally collapsed from exhaustion, Jack caught her, carrying her to a quiet room where she could rest. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved them." "We saved them," she corrected weakly. "All of us together." The Silver Creek rescue became legendary, adding to Clara's already considerable reputation. But more importantly to Clara, it demonstrated that her students and methods could handle the worst situations frontier life could offer. The journey back to Dry Creek took 2 days, with Clara drifting in and out of consciousness from sheer exhaustion. Jack never left her side, his weathered hands gentle as he tended to her needs. When they finally arrived home, Elizabeth was waiting with both children, her face tight with worry that dissolved into relief when she saw Clara's eyes open. "You magnificent fool," Elizabeth said, tears streaming down her face. "You could have died." "But I didn't," Clara whispered, reaching weakly for Thomas. "And 32 men are alive because we were there." The recovery took weeks, during which Clara was forced to delegate more than ever before. It was during this time that she realized something profound. The college, the clinic, even the territorial medical board could function without her constant presence. She'd built something larger than herself, a system that would endure beyond any individual. "You've been trying to carry the world on your shoulders," Jack observed one evening as Clara sat in their garden, Thomas sleeping in her arms while she reviewed student examinations. "Maybe it's time to let the world carry itself a bit." Before Clara could respond, a carriage arrived bearing unexpected visitors. Dr. William Osler himself, the legendary physician from Johns Hopkins, stepped out along with two colleagues Clara recognized from medical journals, Dr. Mary Putnam Jacobi, one of the few female physicians with national recognition, and Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, the African-American surgeon who'd performed the first successful open-heart surgery. "Dr. Calder," Osler said, removing his hat, "we've come to see this miracle you've built in the desert." Clara stood carefully, still weak but determined to show proper courtesy. "Dr. Osler, I'm honored, but surely—" "We've been reading your papers," Dr. Jacobi interrupted. "Your integrated approach to medical education, combining Western and Eastern techniques, accepting students regardless of gender or race, it's revolutionary." "It's practical," Clara corrected. "Disease doesn't discriminate, so neither should medicine." Over the next 3 days, the distinguished visitors observed classes, examined student work, and interviewed graduates. Dr. Williams was particularly impressed by Clara's willingness to train students of any background. "I've been fighting for years to get Negro physicians accepted in mainstream medicine," he said privately to Clara. "You've simply done it. No fanfare, no special programs, just equal opportunity based on merit." "A student's skin color doesn't affect their ability to suture a wound or diagnose pneumonia," Clara replied. "I'd be foolish to turn away talented minds for such arbitrary reasons." Dr. Osler, meanwhile, was fascinated by the integration of traditional Chinese medicine into the curriculum. He spent hours with Wei Chun, taking detailed notes on diagnostic techniques Western medicine had never considered. "This is the future," he declared at a dinner Elizabeth had organized in the visitors' honor. "Not the dominance of one medical tradition, but the synthesis of all healing knowledge." "You'll face opposition saying that publicly," Dr. Jacobi warned. "I've been facing opposition my entire career. At least now it'll be for something truly worthwhile." Before leaving, the three physicians made an extraordinary offer. They wanted to establish a formal partnership between Clara's College and Johns Hopkins, creating an exchange program that would send students in both directions. "Your students would gain access to our resources and recognition," Osler explained. "Our students would learn the integrated techniques you've pioneered." Clara accepted immediately, knowing this would finally secure her graduates' acceptance in the broader medical community. But the announcement triggered unexpected controversy from a source she hadn't anticipated, some of her own students. "We came here because this was different," one young woman argued at a college meeting. "Now you want to make us like everywhere else?" "I want to give you choices," Clara responded. "The choice to practice anywhere, not just in territories that recognize our credentials. The choice to learn from the best minds in medicine, regardless of where they teach." The debate continued for hours, with passionate arguments on both sides. It was Margaret Hayes, now an instructor at the college, who provided the resolution. "Dr. Calder has always taught us to take what works and improve what doesn't," she said. "This partnership lets us do both. We share what we've learned while learning what we haven't yet discovered." The partnership was formalized just as another crisis emerged. A cholera outbreak struck the territorial capital, spreading rapidly through contaminated water supplies. The governor requested Clara's immediate assistance, not just as a physician but as medical board president to coordinate the response. Clara arrived to find chaos. The local physicians were overwhelmed, politicians were panicking, and people were dying by the dozens daily. She immediately implemented strict quarantine procedures and began investigating the water sources. The contamination is coming from the main reservoir, she announced at an emergency meeting, having traced the infection patterns. It needs to be drained and cleaned immediately. That would leave the city without water for days, a politician protested, and the cholera will leave it without people permanently. Choose. The governor backed Clara's recommendations, and she coordinated a massive public health response. Students from the college arrived to help, along with physicians she'd trained. They set up treatment centers, distributed clean water, and educated the public on prevention. Jack worked alongside her, managing logistics with military precision. At one point, when local authorities resisted Clara's orders, he stood beside her in full Gunslinger regalia, a reminder that the legendary Jack Calder still existed beneath the respectable administrator exterior. "The doctor's orders will be followed," he said quietly, hand resting on his Colt. "Or I'll ask why they're not being followed. I prefer not to have that conversation." The orders were followed. The outbreak was contained within 3 weeks, with a death rate far lower than typical cholera epidemics. Clara's systematic approach became a model for disease outbreak response, copied by health departments across the country. But the victory came at a personal cost. The stress triggered a recurrence of the exhaustion that had plagued Clara since Thomas's birth. Dr. Jacobi, who'd extended her stay to help with the outbreak, examined Clara with the thoroughness of a skilled physician and the concern of a friend. "You're suffering from chronic fatigue, likely related to the traumatic birth and subsequent overexertion," she diagnosed. "You need rest, real rest, not the few hours you steal between crises." "I can't rest. There's too much. There will always be too much. That's the nature of medicine. But you've built something remarkable here, Clara. You have trained physicians, capable administrators, an entire system that can function without you killing yourself to maintain it." Elizabeth, who'd been listening from the doorway, entered with determination written on her face. "She's right. You've been fighting so long you've forgotten you already won. The college is thriving, your students are successful, the medical board is established. What more are you trying to prove?" Clara sat quietly, Thomas playing at her feet while the words sank in. She had been fighting from habit, from the ingrained need to constantly justify her existence in spaces that had tried to exclude her. But Elizabeth was right. She'd already won those battles. "I don't know how to stop fighting," Clara admitted quietly. "Then learn," Jack said, entering with hope in his arms. "The same way you learned medicine, law, motherhood, one day at a time." The decision to step back wasn't easy, but Clara began delegating more authority. Margaret Hayes took over much of the college administration, proving herself a capable leader. Other graduates assumed responsibility for various programs. The Territorial Medical Board elected a vice president to handle routine matters. For the first time since arriving in Dry Creek, Clara had time to simply live. She spent mornings with Thomas, teaching him to read using medical textbooks as primers, much to Jack's amusement. "Most children learn with fairy tales," he observed. "Fairy tales don't explain how the circulatory system works. Our son is going to be very popular at parties. Our son is going to be brilliant, like his mother, and brave, like his father." These quieter times allowed Clara to notice things she'd been too busy to see. The way Dry Creek had transformed from a rough frontier town into a thriving community. The way women now walked the streets with confidence, many running their own businesses. The way her students had spread across the territory and beyond, each one changing their own small piece of the world. One afternoon, while Clara was teaching Thomas about medicinal plants in their garden, a stranger arrived. She was young, perhaps 20, with the dust of hard travel on her clothes and a familiar determination in her eyes. "Dr. Calder? I'm Jennifer Barnes from Nebraska. I've come to apply to your medical college. The next entrance examination isn't for 2 months. I know, I came early to work to earn money for tuition. I'll do anything, clean, cook, whatever's needed. I need to be here. My sister died in childbirth last year because the only doctor in our area was drunk. I swore on her grave I'd become a doctor, a real doctor, so no other woman would die that way." Clara saw herself in this young woman, saw the same desperate need to transform grief into purpose. "Can you read and write?" "Yes, ma'am. And I've studied every medical book I could find." "Then report to the clinic tomorrow morning. You'll work as an assistant while preparing for the entrance examination. If you pass, we'll discuss tuition arrangements. Jennifer's face lit up with a joy that made Clara remember her own first day at Boston Women's Medical Seminary. After the young woman left, Jack found Clara still in the garden, tears on her cheeks. "Regrets?" he asked gently. "No. Gratitude. That young woman will become a doctor because we built something here. How many more like her are out there, seeing possibility where there was none before?" "Hundreds, maybe thousands. Then it was worth it. All of it." That evening brought news that would test Clara's resolve to step back. A telegram arrived from Washington. President Cleveland wanted to appoint Clara as Surgeon General of the United States, the first woman to hold any federal medical position. "It's an incredible honor," Elizabeth said, reading the telegram repeatedly as if the words might change. "You can't refuse this." "I can and I will," Clara replied calmly. "My place is here." "Clara, this is a chance to influence national medical policy, which I can do through my writing, my students, and the model we've created here. Besides," Clara looked at Thomas, who was determinedly trying to catch fireflies in the garden, "I won't raise my son in Washington's political swamp. He deserves to grow up where the air is clean and people say what they mean." Jack said nothing, but his relief was evident. He'd rebuilt himself in Dry Creek, transformed from gunslinger to educator, from destroyer to protector. The thought of leaving clearly unsettled him. Clara sent a polite refusal to Washington, recommending Margaret Hayes instead. The response was swift and unexpected. They accepted her recommendation. Margaret would become the first female federal medical officer, though not at the Surgeon General level. "You did this," Margaret said when she received the appointment, tears streaming down her face. "You opened the door, and now we're all walking through it." "Then keep walking," Clara replied, "and hold it open for those behind you." Margaret's departure left a gap at the college, but it was quickly filled by new graduates eager to teach. The institution had become self-sustaining, no longer dependent on Clara's constant involvement. This became fortunate when Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was different. She was older, wiser, more willing to accept help. When complications arose in the 7th month, she allowed Dr. Jacoby, who was visiting again, to take over her care. "You're at risk for premature delivery," Mary diagnosed after a thorough examination. "Complete bed rest is required." For once, Clara didn't argue. She spent the remaining weeks reading, teaching Thomas, and writing a comprehensive medical textbook that would become the standard reference for frontier medicine. Jack rarely left her side, his protective instincts in full force. The baby came 3 weeks early, but healthy. A daughter they named Sarah, after Sarah Miller, who'd been one of Clara's first supporters in Dry Creek. The delivery was difficult but manageable, with Elizabeth and Dr. Jacoby attending, while Jack paced outside like an expectant father from a comedy show. "A girl," Clara whispered, holding her daughter for the first time. "She'll grow up in a world where she can be anything." "Thanks to her mother," Jack added, finally allowed into the room. "Thanks to all of us," Clara corrected, looking around at the women who'd helped deliver her daughter, her sister, her colleague, her former students. No one changes the world alone. Recovery from Sarah's birth was slower than from Thomas's, forcing Clara to remain relatively inactive for months. During this time, she received a steady stream of visitors, former students, now successful physicians, patients whose lives she'd saved, young women seeking advice on medical careers. One visitor stood out. Cole Harrigan's widow arrived unexpectedly, dressed in mourning black despite her husband being dead for years. Clara tensed, remembering the violence associated with that name, but the woman came in peace. "I wanted to thank you," she said simply. "Cole's death freed me from a hell you can't imagine. I heard it was your man who killed him, defending you. In defending you, he saved me too. I'm sorry for your suffering." "Don't be. Cole chose his path. But I wanted you to know the money he left, blood money from years of killing, I've used it to fund a scholarship at your college. For women escaping violent situations who want to become doctors. It was a transformation Clara hadn't expected, violence transmuted into healing, blood money becoming education funds. The scholarship would eventually support dozens of women, each one breaking cycles of abuse through education and independence. As Sarah grew stronger and Clara recovered, life settled into a rhythm she'd never experienced, something approaching peace. Mornings were spent with the children, afternoons at the clinic treating patients, evenings teaching occasional classes or writing. It was a full life, but no longer a frantic one. "You've changed," Jack observed one evening as they sat on their porch, watching Thomas try to teach Sarah to walk despite her being only 6 months old. "Have I?" "You're calmer, less driven to prove something every moment. Maybe because I finally believe it's been proven." "What has?" "That I belong here. That we belong here. That what we've built will last." Their peace was interrupted by commotion in the street. A group of riders approached, led by someone Clara recognized with a mix of surprise and wariness, Marcus Harrigan, whom she hadn't seen since that violent confrontation years ago. Jack was already standing, hand near his weapon, but Marcus raised both hands peacefully. "I come with business, not violence," he called out. "May we talk?" They met in the clinic, neutral ground where Clara felt most confident. Marcus had aged, his cold handsomeness now lined with years of hard living, but his eyes remained sharp, calculating. "I have a proposition," he began without preamble. "I'm dying." "Cancer," the doctors say. "Months at most." Clara's physician instincts kicked in. "What kind?" "There might be treatments. Beyond treatment, I'm told. But that's not why I'm here. I've spent my life taking it from others. Before I die, I want to give something back. Blood money doesn't wash clean easily. No, but it can build something better than what it destroyed. I want to fund a hospital here in Dry Creek, a real hospital with modern equipment, multiple operating rooms, everything your graduates need to practice at the highest level." Clara studied him suspiciously. "Why?" "Because you were right years ago. I was already dead, just hadn't stopped moving. Well, now I'm stopping, and I want my last act to be creation rather than destruction." "And you expect us to name it after you? The Marcus Harrigan Memorial Hospital?" Marcus laughed, a sound like grinding glass. "God, no. Name it after someone worth remembering. Your sister who died, perhaps? Or one of your students. Just let me pay for it." Clara looked at Jack, who remained skeptical but thoughtful. They'd needed a proper hospital for years, making do with the limited clinic space. This could transform medical care for the entire region. "We accept," Clara said finally, "but with conditions. The hospital treats everyone regardless of ability to pay. It maintains teaching facilities for the college. And yes, we'll name it after someone worth remembering, the Morrison Brothers Hospital, after Tom and Pete who stood by us when it mattered." Marcus nodded, seeming almost relieved. "Draw up the papers. I'll sign whatever you need." The hospital construction began immediately, with Jack overseeing the project while Clara designed the medical facilities. It would be the most advanced hospital west of Chicago, with electric lighting, proper ventilation, and sterilization equipment imported from Germany. During construction, Clara received word that would reshape her final years. The new president, McKinley, wanted to establish a national medical education board and wanted Clara to chair it. This time, the offer came with conditions that made it impossible to refuse. She could remain in Dry Creek, traveling to Washington only quarterly, and the board would be composed equally of men and women. "It's everything you fought for," Elizabeth said, reviewing the offer. "Equal representation, recognition of your methods, the power to shape medical education nationally. It's also a massive responsibility, which has never stopped you before." Clara accepted, becoming the first woman to chair a federal board. The announcement caused predictable controversy, but also unexpected support from medical institutions that had witnessed the success of her students. The Morrison Brothers Hospital opened the same month Clara assumed her federal position. The opening ceremony drew dignitaries from across the nation, including Dr. Osler and several senators. Marcus Harrigan attended despite being skeletal from his illness, standing in the back, watching something beautiful rise from his violent legacy. "It's remarkable," Dr. Osler said, touring the facilities. "You've created a medical center that rivals anything in Boston or New York." "We've created it," Clara corrected. "This represents thousands of people choosing to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm." In her opening address, Clara stood before hundreds of gathered people. Students, patients, supporters, and even former opponents who'd come to respect what she'd built. 20 years ago, I arrived in Dry Creek as a rejected mail-order bride, told I was too smart, too educated, too much for this frontier, she began. Today, we open a hospital that will serve generations, staffed by physicians who were told they couldn't exist. Women, minorities, anyone who didn't fit the narrow definition of who could heal. She paused, seeing familiar faces in the crowd. Martha Brennan, gray-haired but still fierce. Tom Morrison, whose faith had never wavered. Wei Chen, whose integration of Eastern medicine had saved countless lives. Her students, now doctors, now teachers, now leaders in their own right. This hospital stands as proof that barriers exist only until someone chooses to break them. That impossible is just a word used by those who benefit from limitations. That healing belongs to anyone with the skill and heart to practice it. The applause was thunderous, but Clara barely heard it. She was watching Jack standing with their children, his scarred face soft with pride. Thomas, now 5, was solemnly explaining something medical to Sarah, who listened with rapt attention despite being barely 2. They would grow up in a world fundamentally different from the one Clara had been born into, a world where their potential wasn't predetermined by their gender or circumstances. That evening, as the celebration continued, Marcus Harrigan approached Clara privately. He was dying, clearly, probably days from the end. "I won't live to see the hospital's first patient," he said matter-of-factly, "but I wanted to thank you." For what? For showing me that redemption was possible, even for someone like me. I spent so many years believing destruction was the only power that mattered. You proved creation is infinitely more powerful. He died 3 days later, alone, but perhaps not unrepentant. Clara attended his burial, one of only a handful who did, and said a prayer for transformation, that even the worst acts could somehow contribute to better futures. The years that followed brought continued growth and change. The medical college became a university, offering degrees in nursing, pharmacy, and eventually other sciences. The hospital expanded twice, becoming the primary medical center for 3 territories. Clara's textbooks became standard references, her methods widely adopted. But it was the smaller victories that meant the most. Jennifer Barnes, the young woman who'd arrived with nothing but determination, graduated first in her class and returned to Nebraska, where she established a network of rural clinics. A former prostitute named Mary Kelly, sponsored by the Harrigan Scholarship, became a renowned surgeon specializing in women's health. A Chinese immigrant named Liu Ming combined Western and Eastern techniques to develop treatments for conditions both traditions had considered incurable. Each success story vindicated Clara's belief that talent existed everywhere, waiting only for opportunity. By her 50th birthday, over 300 physicians had graduated from her programs, spreading across the country like seeds, each planting new possibilities wherever they landed. The birthday celebration was massive, with telegrams from presidents and paupers alike. But Clara spent it quietly, walking through Dry Creek with Jack, noting all the changes. Where Sam's saloon had stood, there was now a library. The old hotel where gunmen had stayed was now dormitories for nursing students. The dusty main street was paved, with electric streetlights and automobiles beginning to appear alongside horses. "Do you miss the old days?" Clara asked Jack as they paused where the original clinic had stood. "Which old days? When I was killing men for money? When you were fighting just to be recognized as human? When violence was the only law that mattered? When things were simpler?" Jack laughed. "Things were never simple, Clara. We just had simpler problems, survival instead of success, fighting instead of building. I'll take these complexities over that simplicity any day." They were interrupted by a young girl, perhaps 10, who ran up clutching a book. "Dr. Calder, my mama said you're the one who made it so girls can be doctors." "I was one of many people who helped make that possible," Clara corrected gently. "Well, I'm going to be a doctor too. I'm going to cure cancer." "That's a worthy goal. Study hard, question everything, and never let anyone tell you it's impossible." The girl ran off and Jack smiled. Another seed planted. The best kind of legacy. As they continued walking, Clara reflected on the journey from that train platform where Samuel Dyer had first dismissed her as too smart to be a proper bride. Every rejection, every fight, every small victory had led to this, a world where that little girl could declare her intention to cure cancer without anyone laughing. "I have something to tell you," Jack said suddenly. "I've been accepted to law school." Clara stopped in surprise. "What?" "Elizabeth has been teaching me, preparing me. I want to become a lawyer specializing in medical law, protecting doctors like you from those who would use legal means to stop medical progress." Jack Calder, attorney at law. Clara laughed with delight. Samuel Dyer would be rolling in his grave. Good. Let him roll. That night, they hosted a dinner for close friends and family. Elizabeth and James were there with Hope, now a teenager considering following her aunt's footsteps into medicine. Tom and Pete Morrison, both gray but still vital, told stories of the old days that grew more elaborate with each telling. Doc Hawkins, sober for 5 years now, raised a toast. To Clara Calder, who came to Dry Creek too smart to be a bride and became too important to be ignored. To all of us, Clara countered, every person in this room chose to build rather than tear down. We all created this. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Clara stood on her porch, looking out over the town that had become her life's work. Sarah was asleep in Jack's arms, Thomas reading a medical journal by lamplight, already showing signs of following his mother's path. "Any regret, Jack asked, echoing his question from years before. Clara considered. She thought of the violence survived, the friends lost, the prices paid. She thought of Samuel Dyer, dead in the dust, and Marcus Harrigan, seeking redemption too late. She thought of every woman who'd been told no, every barrier broken, every life saved. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. Every choice led here, to this moment, to this life we've built. How could I regret the path that brought me home?" Jack kissed her forehead gently. "Then we've won." "No," Clara corrected, looking out at the lights of the medical college, the hospital, the town that had embraced the future despite its violent past. "We've just begun." The next morning brought new challenges, an outbreak to contain, students to teach, policies to shape. Clara rose to meet them as she always had, but now with the confidence of someone who'd already proven the impossible was merely difficult. She was no longer the desperate woman fleeing a bad marriage, or the fighter constantly defending her right to exist. She was Dr. Clara Calder, who'd come to the frontier too smart to be owned and had become too vital to be silenced. As she entered the hospital that morning, passing under the sign that read, "Morrison Brothers Hospital, where healing has no boundaries," she smiled at the thought that somewhere, Samuel Dyer's ghost was watching a world transformed by the woman he'd tried to break. She hoped he was learning, even in death, that intelligence in a woman wasn't a flaw to be corrected, but a force that could reshape the world. The hospital was already busy, with students, doctors, and patients creating the controlled chaos of healing. Clara moved through it all with practiced ease, stopping to consult here, teach there, encourage everywhere. This was her battlefield now, where lives were saved instead of taken, where the future was built one patient, one student, one breakthrough at a time. At noon, she received word that would bring her story full circle. A young woman had arrived from Boston, carrying a letter of introduction from the Boston Women's Medical Seminary. She was fleeing an arranged marriage to a man who told her she was too educated to be a proper wife. Clara met her in the same office where she'd once treated Jack Calder's gunshot wound, where she'd delivered babies and saved lives and built something from nothing. "Dr. Calder," the young woman began nervously, "I've heard you accept students who don't fit elsewhere." "I accept students who belong everywhere, but have been told they fit nowhere," Clara corrected. "Tell me your story." As the woman spoke, of dreams denied, of intelligence punished, of the desperate need to be more than property, Clara saw herself, saw Elizabeth, saw every woman who'd ever been told her mind was a burden rather than a gift. "You can stay," Clara said when the story ended. "Study, learn, become whatever you're capable of becoming. The only limit here is your own dedication." The woman cried then, tears of relief and joy, and the overwhelming emotion of finally being seen as fully human. Clara remembered that feeling, remembered arriving in Dry Creek with nothing but determination and a medical bag, facing a world that insisted she was too much. Now, 20 years later, she'd proven that there was no such thing as too smart, too educated, too ambitious. There was only potential waiting to be unleashed, minds waiting to be challenged, futures waiting to be built. As the young woman left to begin her new life, Jack appeared in the doorway, older now, scarred but distinguished in his law student attire, still wearing his gun but using words as his weapons these days. "Another one saved?" he asked. "Another one beginning," Clara corrected. "The saving she'll do herself. With a little help. With a lot of help. That's what we're here for, to help each other become what we're meant to be." Jack moved into the office, pulling Clara into an embrace. "Have I told you today that you've changed the world? The world changed itself. I just refused to accept it as it was." "Same thing." They stood there, holding each other, two people who'd found each other in violence and built something beautiful from the ashes of what they'd had to destroy. Outside, Dry Creek thrived, a testament to what happened when intelligence was celebrated rather than feared, when women were partners rather than property, when healing mattered more than tradition. "Come on," Clara said finally. "We have work to do." "Always," Jack agreed, "but it's good work. The best work." They left the office together, walking into a future they'd carved from an impossible past, ready for whatever challenges remained. Because Clara had learned, through blood and tears and triumph, that being too smart wasn't a flaw, it was a gift. And gifts were meant to be shared, to be taught, to be passed on until the whole world was transformed by the radical idea that intelligence, compassion, and determination knew no gender, no race, no boundaries, except those people accepted. She'd been rejected for being too smart. Now she was revered for exactly that quality. And in that transformation lay the proof that the world could change. One person, one choice, one act of courage at a time. The pine tree outside the hospital, planted the day it opened, stood tall against the desert sky. Its roots ran deep, its branches spread wide, offering shade to all who sought shelter. It would outlive them all, Clara, Jack, everyone who'd fought to build this place. But what it represented would outlive even the tree, the unshakable truth that human potential, once unleashed, could not be contained. Clara looked up at its branches, then at the hospital, the college, the town that had become her life's work. She'd been a mail-order bride rejected for being too smart. Now she was a teacher, a healer, a mother, a revolutionary who'd never fired a shot but had won a war most didn't even know was being fought. "Ready for the afternoon clinic?" Jack asked. "Always," Clara replied, taking his arm as they walked toward their next challenge, their next opportunity to prove that the impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been done yet. The story of the too smart bride was ending, but the legacy of Dr. Clara Calder was just beginning, spreading across the country like wildfire, carried by every woman who'd learned that her mind was not a burden, but a blessing, not a limitation, but a liberation. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled across the desert, bringing the promise of rain to make the gardens grow.